Chapter 218, Great Ominous Mountain, Roar. The huge golden eagle gave out a loud shriek and fled all the way towards the three legendary experts. It was extremely fast and arrived in front of them in a blink of an eye, and stretched out its huge claws. "Back off, you filthy beast!" One of the three old men swayed from side to side to barely avoid the deadly claws. He immediately flew above the golden eagle's head and instantly unleashed his terrifying powers, shooting numerous water arrows towards the golden eagle. The great golden eagle shrieked in a loud voice, instantly lifted its golden wings upward, and in a flash, the innumerable golden feathers on its wings started to glow with golden light. Its golden wings seemed all prepared to welcome the incoming water arrows from above. Boom! 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 The innumerable blue-colored water arrows and dazzling golden feathers scattered everywhere and covered up most of the visible sky. It seemed as if the ambience of the world itself had changed in an instant. The gigantic explosion as if churned the ocean, setting off tremors and ocean waves in all directions. Yi Shiwen immediately dived into the sea when he saw several meters high sea waves coming towards him, along with the aftershock of the explosion. The terrifying might present in the aftershock pushed all three of them in random directions into the sea, while their boat was directly shattered to bits. Yi Shiwen took a direct hit and the huge impact almost made him lose consciousness, but he knew that if he fainted in this damned place then there would be no saving him. This golden eagle was extremely tyrannical and was literally chasing around legendary level experts as if it was chasing stray dogs. In the end, it was hard to imagine its rank and the level of its cultivation. Yi Shiwen was cursing these old men in his heart. If they knew that they wouldn't be able to escape from the golden eagle, then what did they mess with it in the first place? Each time the two sides clashed, it caused a blast so potent that it seemed to have been caused as a result of collision between celestial bodies. The whole sea was boiling and literally burning to the point of vaporizing as a result of terrifying attacks, derived from the fluctuations in the world principles. These fluctuations in world laws were morphing everything on the scene, and Yi Shiwen felt intense pressure which began to suffocate him on the spot. The protective layer of Zhen Yuan on Yi Ziwen's body was instantly neutralized by the aftermath of the battle, even though it was taking place about 1 li away from there. The terrifying fluctuations in the world laws were almost about to crush Yi Shiwen to death. Tianyuan Mirror! Yi Shiwen gave out a loud shout and Tianyuan Mirror instantly flew out from his body and irradiated rays of scarlet light, forming a protective curtain around him. Only after this, Yi Shiwen finally relaxed and felt a little better. At this time, he looked all around but couldn't find Qin Ruochen and Hua Menghan. Then, suddenly Yi Shiwen heard a desperate cry and looked up, only to see that the old experts had been firmly clutched in the claws of that golden eagle. Their bodies had been pierced by the horrifying claws and the blood was endlessly streaming out from their wounds. A bone-chilling sea breeze blew and the entire area was filled with the smell of blood. How could they possibly survive after being clutched in the fearful claws of that golden eagle? They struggled for a while but ultimately died. The golden eagle roared and seemed quite self-satisfied. While still clutching the corpses of the three old men, it immediately flapped its wings and soon disappeared into the horizon, leaving a long trace of golden light across the sky. When the golden eagle disappeared from there, the sea finally calmed down, although still turbulent because of the usual rough waves, but when compared with the dreadful waves from a while ago, it seemed quite tranquil. After witnessing this scene, Yi Shiwen suddenly recalled reading about a mysterious bird in the myths and legends. This magical bird was called golden-winged eagle, a legendary giant bird which was famous for taking dragons as its food. He only considered it a ridiculous legend initially, but after witnessing the legendary golden-winged eagle with his own eyes, he couldn't help but held his breath. To think a mythical bird from ancient fables was actually living on this island. This demon island was extremely dangerous, just like a wild forest from ancient times. Not to mention, it was a host to bad weather and all kinds of unusual demon beasts. Yi Shiwen searched for Hua Menghan and Qin Ruochen for a while, but couldn't even find a trace of the two. He could only give up and advance towards the demon island. He was aware of the fact that Hua Menghan and Qin Ruochen were the experts of Truth Realm and shouldn't have any trouble breathing underwater. He continued the search inside the sea but was surprised to not see any demon beasts there, even though this part of the sea was supposed to be infested with several kinds of sea beasts. Of course, he didn't dare to approach the dark clouds. Yi Shiwen walked for a day and night in the sea and finally reached the demon island. The island was completely surrounded by pitch-black clouds. This was a huge island of tens of thousands of miles in radius, floating in the boundless sea, while countless monstrous waves were crashing against it. On the island, Yi Shiwen looked from afar and noticed that this was not so much of an island, but was more of a huge continent. The immense emerald green forest appeared pleasant to the eye. One could hear loud beastly roars coming from the woods from time to time. The terminus of the endless forest was actually a towering mountain, which was shrouded in dense fog. One could clearly see that it had a desolate atmosphere, which was continually spreading in all directions. Moreover, precious medicinal plants were present everywhere on the island, including some special herbs for cultivation like several types of ginseng, white fungus, grass fire, and so on. No wonder the demon island was so famous and attracted everyone's attention. After all, heavenly treasures and rare herbs were spread everywhere on this island. Yi Shiwen, looking for a place to rest, sat down cross-legged and began to meditate to recover the lost Zhen Yuan. In order to resist the aftermath of those attacks, he had almost depleted the reserves of Zhen Yuan in his body. At this time, Yi Shiwen wasn't interested in collecting herbs and heavenly treasures because restoring strength was more important to protect himself on this island more than anything else, and although many of these treasures were important raw materials for medicines, but only for average experts. Considering Yi Shiwen's cultivation level, these things didn't have any significance. Daytime passed quickly, and the island welcomed nightfall. Roar! 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 Numerous roars of unknown origin started to come from the center of the island, where the towering giant mountain was located. The noise from intermittent roars suddenly pulled him out of the meditation state. The fearful sound of roars induced a chilling sensation in Yi Shiwen's heart. From the time he stepped on the island and came all the way to this place to rest, he saw several demon beasts on the way and was already accustomed to a variety of roars, which simply couldn't affect his concentration, but these horrifying roars that began to arise from that far-off giant mountain, after the nightfall, actually sent chills down his spine. The roars coming from that giant mountain were similar to the shrieks of a ghost, and definitely didn't seem to belong to a living creature. During the day, the mountain appeared to be shrouded in fog, but during the night, an endless amount of surging dead qi would cover up the entire mountain area and also surge up into the sky, forming dense dark clouds. The usual roaring sounds of various demon beasts would vanish during the nightfall, and for the rest of the night, only the fearful shrieks would continue to transmit throughout the island. The rest of the demon island was always strangely quiet during the night, except the huge mountain which was the only source of those terrible roars. It's very strange. At this time, Yi Shiwen was standing on a tall tree's branch and looking towards the huge mountain. The silver-colored starlight was sprinkled on his body, making him appear very cold and fierce. Well, that's quite a strong dead qi and resentment. Diamo said, "Cannot say how many people must have died to have caused such a dense accumulation of dead qi. It's hard to guess the level of this powerhouse, fair to say, it will be very difficult to kill him, but the point is that what in the world happened to have caused such a terrible scene?" Guillemot muttered. Yi Shiwen looked at the giant mountain, surrounded by an encirclement of dead qi, and frowned. This was an extremely terrible scene because the dead qi was condensed to such an extent that it was visible even with the naked eye. The dreadful roars lasted until dawn. When the stars gradually faded away, the roars also died down. After a while, the dead qi also dissipated in thin air, as if nothing happened. As the roars from the giant mountain disappeared, roars from all sorts of demon beasts began to resound throughout the island, just like the time when Yi Shiwen stepped on this island a day ago. However, these beastly roars sounded pleasing to the ears when compared with the dreadful shrieks from last night. After a night's rest, Yi Shiwen fully recovered. He was now sure of one thing, that this demon island was several times more dangerous than he imagined. Not only did he need to be careful of the other peerless geniuses, but this mysterious island itself was a terrible threat. So, Now was the best time to familiarize himself with the new place and find other people. Since Yi Shiwen believed that he was not the only one who stepped on this island. Meanwhile, he also needed to find the whereabouts of Hua Menghan and Chen Ruochen. Yi Shiwen believed in their strengths and knew that surviving shouldn't be a difficult task for them, so he just needed to scout the island and snoop for any news about the two. Although almost 1,000 people would be setting foot on the Demon Island, but very few would be of average level. The remaining majority of the candidates would turn out to be extraordinary experts, each possessing high cultivation levels. Chapter 219 God's Descendants. The giant mountain was actually only a part of the vast Sierra which crossed from the east to west side of the Demon Island. It was hard to see the terminus of the Sierra. Although the Demon Island was just an island in this boundless sea, but its size was simply beyond the imagination of an ordinary person. Yi Shiwen was flying through the woods, and suddenly from afar, there came intermittent sounds of bang bang bang, one after another, and caused terrifying tremors in the ground. He finally found the source of this noise in the form of large mammoths which came running from far away, trampling and crushing everything in their path, including some of the great towering trees that might have lived for over a millennia. These mammoths actually looked like giant elephants, and almost each of them was about 30 feet tall, and their whole body was covered in brown hair. The two tusks were long, sharp at the tip and curved upward, which made them appear very ominous and dreadful. Almost each and every one of them was at either Truth 5th stage or in Small Truth realm. Although Yi Shiwen had faced several monstrous beasts in the forest, but they all had retreated 3 days' march to give way in the face of Yi Ziwen's superior strength. But right now, these ominous-looking mammoths were actually pursuing him. Ha! Accompanied by a loud shout, a sword in tension fell down from the sky. Poochie! A mammoth was directly cut down. The blood gushed out from the large gaping wound as it fell down on the ground. Yi Ziwen's sharp eyes instantly saw a hint of dark golden color, concealed in the dark red blood. There was a faint trace of golden color in the blood as if a golden thread was mixed in the crimson blood. What? Golden blood? Yi Mo suddenly exclaimed in an astonished manner. How is this possible? This is the characteristic of a god. So these mammoths are actually God's descendants. God's descendants? What do you mean by that? You mean these mammoths turned out to be an immortal's descendants? Yi Shiwen said in an equally astonished voice. God, the most formidable being among the most powerful creatures in the scope of the heaven and earth, and the most famous of whom was naturally the devil god, who was well known for his endless destructive prowess. The devil god gradually fell from his throne and position, but there were some people who possessed immortality and continued to live for generations. They were incredibly formidable beings and became well known in the 10,000 worlds, where some called them immortal sages and some called them gods. In fact, there was a way to ascertain a god's existence. A formidable immortal being contained golden blood in his veins, and their offspring also held golden blood in their body, but with the passage time, generation after generation, the golden blood continued to grow thinner. Even so, the gods' descendants possessed a natural talent and their practice speed was incomparably fast. In the last conversation, Yi Mo was talking on this topic but Yi Shiwen didn't pay much attention. After all, he had never heard about God's descendants and neither did he believe in the existence of a creature called God. Yi Shiwen was from the earth, and unlike most people there who worship different gods, he wasn't indulged in God worship, because he thought that God was a very formidable being and was simply beyond the comprehension of mere humans. In other words, the ancestors of mammoths actually turned out to be as strong as the immortals? Although he couldn't make a guess as to how many generations had already passed in the bloodline, but he was still shocked that the so-called immortals actually existed in this world. However, at this time, Yi Shiwen didn't have time to ponder about this matter, because just then he saw the fast approaching figure of a man far in the horizon. Yi Shiwen took a closer look and saw a man, roughly 30 years old in appearance and dressed in a brilliant warrior's clothing. He was a grandiose-looking man with somewhat rough facial features and a burly body. "Hello, brother." The young man's voice transmitted from afar and fell into Yi Ziwen's ears, after traveling for miles as a sonic boom. The profoundness of his skill was simply unimaginable. "Hey, brother." Yi Shiwen cupped his hands across his chest and said, "It's rare to see someone coming to this island so early." This man had a matured appearance and appeared very forthright. A jolly man like him would certainly not treat Yi Shiwen as an enemy. Although the Demon Island was called a genius meat grinder, but not everyone was bloodthirsty. It was not a competition where only one person would get out alive. Since on such a dangerous island, one simply couldn't afford to offend everyone. Demon Island was going to stay open for a month, so the participants had a window of 1 month's time to reach the island. After 1 month, the island would close down and would open only after a year. "Great Wu State, Wu Xiaochuan," the man said with a smile. "Great Wu State, Yi Shiwen." Yi Shiwen replied, "You do not mind that I am a person from Great Wu State?" Wu Xiaochuan somewhat accidentally said, although he meant it as a joke, but the fact was that Great Wu State and Great Wu State had a long border line, and one simply couldn't imagine the number of conflicts they have had for ages. When the state of Great Wu was formed and was relatively young, then Great Wu State had mobilized almost 1 million warriors to attack it. In the war, Great Wu State's founding emperor was seriously injured and ultimately died. Since then, both sides forged a deadly hatred for each other. In fact, Great Wu State was actually the most hated enemy of Great Wu State. Of course. Yi Shiwen said with a smile, after all, he didn't have a sense of belonging to this country itself. All he cared about was his family and friends. Haha, good, even I don't care about such bullshit matters about hatred and all. It really tires me to death. Wu Xiaochuan laughed and said, "You are a member of Great Wu State's royal clan, and if you don't care about all that, then why should I?" Yi Shiwen also laughed and said, he could make out that this Wu Xiaochuan was a relatively sincere and jolly person. It was actually rare to find a generous expert like him in this world. Wu Xiaochuan's surname was Wu, and was derived from Great Wu State's royal clan, which also indicated that he was actually a royal prince. Although Great Wu State and Great Wu State were mortal enemies, but Yi Shiwen's knowledge on the topic was quite limited. The time of his stay in this world was fairly short, and since the day he crossed over to this world, he had spent most of his time in practicing martial arts. Ha, well said. No matter what nonsense is going on between our countries, it has nothing to do with us, martial artists. Wu Xiaochuan said with a smile. No one knew for how many years there had been a rare quiet border between the two states, and it was already gradually evolving from hate between countries into a turf war. Yi Shiwen, why are you not together with the people of Great Wu State? Wu Xiaochuan asked. Actually, I arrived here with 2 fellow disciples of Yuan School, but 2 days ago, we bumped into a golden eagle which was chasing down several legendary level experts. Their battle caused the destruction of our boat, and I was also separated from them. Yi Shiwen said, Did you run into those idiots from Heavenly Rock faction? Wu Xiaochuan asked. Do you know who they are? Yi Shiwen asked. Wu Xiaochuan nodded and said, they were part of a rising big influence in our Great Wu State. When they learnt about the legend of the Demon Island, they sent a lot of formidable experts to capture the entire island. In the end, the golden-winged eagle killed numerous of their disciples, and only a few old guys were able to escape from the island. But according to what you said, it seems they were chased down by the golden-winged eagle and ultimately perished at its claws. Those idiots were too arrogant. Did they really take the Demon Island's legend as a hoax? They once had a fearful influence, and were confident enough to plan a raid on the Demon Island, but in the end, they all died. And now the weakened faction will soon break up into several small forces. Wu Xiaochuan said with a look of disdain in his eyes. Obviously, he didn't have a favorable impression of them. Since you still haven't found your people, why don't you come and stay with us for the time being? Wu Xiaochuan invited him. Chapter 220 Broken Relations. These people were lucky and could be called elites among the peerless geniuses in their respective forces, otherwise, there was no way to be summoned by Demon Island Bell. Everyone settled here and were waiting for more people to come, but it was only just the beginning. In the coming 10 days' time, more and more people would continue to arrive on the Demon Island. Then, it would truly be the most intense time. After all, besides competing with each other, these experts would have to deal with this mysterious island's environment. However, at least majority of them were not here to battle with others, but just to find various precious heavenly treasures, so there was no need to make enemies here and there. Of course, at some point they might have to compete over rare treasure, and then if necessary, they wouldn't hesitate to kill. 10 days passed quickly, and during this period, more and more people arrived in this valley, and the number of gathered experts soon reached more than 200. Yi Shiwen did not stay here for a long time. Every time he stayed for some time then set out in search of Hua Menghan and Chen Ruochen. And he did not want to stay here for a long time, because to be honest he didn't want to join their alliance. Yes, 3 days ago when Yi Shiwen returned from the search, he heard that an alliance had been formed during his absence. And it was made under the leadership of 3 super experts, namely Xiao Zhen, Lu Yueru and Wu Xiaochuan. The 3 super experts initiated the idea of forming an alliance and received many people's support. After all, if they could have the backing of an alliance, then treasure hunt would be fairly easy and safer. Of course, there were some ambitious people who didn't join the alliance. 3 days later when he arrived here, things had slightly changed and looked more formal. Even the population had decreased in the valley. Initially, there were 200 experts gathered here, but now merely 60 to 70 people stayed back and probably as part of the alliance. Yi Shiwen occasionally used to come here but only stayed for a while then used to leave in a hurry, so he didn't recognize several faces. He didn't even know when they built a small city in the valley. However, considering the magical powers and capabilities of these truth-level experts, building a small city from scratch shouldn't be too difficult. Today, when Yi Shiwen arrived, he saw that a group of warriors had arrived on the Demon Island. The group consisted of 10 men and was led by a tall, skinny man, who was clad in leather clothing and had disheveled hair while there was an unchanging sinister and ruthless expression on his face. In front of him, a huge, formidable-looking tiger was crouching on the ground and its roars were echoing throughout the valley. It seemed like they were waiting for the city gate to open, and there were few guard disciples stationed near the gate, which seemed a bit strange. After some time, the city gate finally opened. When the skinny man saw the gate opening, he lifted his chip up, puffed out his chest, and walked forward. Other members of the group immediately followed after him, and none of them dared to overtake him. However, suddenly, all of them were surprised to see that from the other side, a black figure took the lead and went ahead, meanwhile also overtaking the skinny man in the process. A ruthless look appeared in that skinny man's eyes. He immediately used his mind connection with the tiger and ordered it to attack. A fierce and deafening roar resounded everywhere, and it suddenly transformed into a yellow and black lighting and leapt towards Yi Shiwen from behind, while keeping its big mouth opened as if to bite him to death. The tiger's terrifying power was overflowing at this moment, and whether it was the guard disciples or the followers of the skinny man, all were trembling with fear. They were not strong enough in the face of such a beast, especially since they were mostly the experts of Truth First Stage, Truth Second Stage or Truth Third Stage at most. This tiger was at least a demon beast of small Truth realm, so how could they not feel terror and threat from it? For experts of this age, stepping into the Truth realm itself was a great feat. Reaching small Truth realm was not something all could achieve at such a young age, except few exceptionally talented disciples like Xiao Zhen and handful of other experts. How is this possible? It was a small Truth realm demon tiger and considered a frightening creature in the outer world, but was actually slaughtered in one blade attack. Who is this man and how is he so formidable? Do you want to die? Yi Shiwen wasn't afraid of him, and at the worst he would leave this place. After all, his cultivation level was far worse than that of Xiao Zhen, so fighting him was not an option. But that was only for now because later, the situation might be different, therefore he was not afraid of Xiao Zhen. And as far that skinny youth was concerned, Yi Shiwen was simply not paying attention to him. The skinny man was certainly an extremely formidable powerhouse and was at the peak of small truth, but it was not enough to impress Yi Shiwen. After all, the skinny man's current battle strength was only comparable to Yi Ziwen's battle strength when he used to be on Truth Third Layer, and now, Yi Shiwen had already broken through to the Truth Fourth Stage. After listening to the words of Yi Shiwen, there was a sudden commotion among the members of Battling Heaven's Brotherhood. Everyone saw what happened there, and they were certainly smart enough to figure out who was at fault here. It was the skinny man who first tried to kill Yi Shiwen, and when Yi Shiwen acted in self-defense, he was actually accused of provoking their brotherhood. Xiao Zhen made an appearance and interfered, but if he had acted alone, nobody would say anything. However, he kept on proclaiming in the name of brotherhood, which was not a right thing to do. Why was he pulling them into this matter for no reason? Indeed, they were now the members of Battling Heaven's Brotherhood, but they joined it just because they were looking for a backing, since they were looking for protection. They didn't join the Brotherhood to act as someone's lackeys and be treated as cannon fodder. One must know, even the most ordinary members of Battling Heaven's Brotherhood were actually considered super geniuses at their respective native places, plus they were also the center of attraction in their sections. None of them was foolish enough to willingly act as a cannon fodder for someone else's sake. Xiao Zhen also noticed the commotion among the members of Battling Heaven's Brotherhood, and his complexion suddenly turned unsightly. He immediately looked towards Yi Shiwen, but actually saw that his fierce eyes were full of hostility and killing intention. No one knew what Yi Shiwen was thinking and why he had not yet taken any action. Yi Shiwen did not stay, just turned around and left, but was actually secretly prepared to immediately fight back if someone tried to attack him. But after this matter, he knew one thing, that his relation with Battling Heaven's Brotherhood had completely broken off, even though there was no good relationship between them to begin with. Xiao Zhen didn't know what to do until Yi Ziwen's figure vanished from there. He didn't do anything to stop Yi Shiwen and let him go, but the killing intention in his eyes was still unabated. As the voice fell, a middle-aged man flew out of the wreckage of palace and coldly looked towards the sky. He had a dignified bearing and was clad in a golden-colored emperor's robe. In the sky, the scattered clouds suddenly agglutinate again and revealed a huge glowing eye in the center. If you dare to go against the heaven's will, you cannot do that without a fight. A muffled voice echoed everywhere, and a huge lightning maliciously struck down. The scene had a crazy transformation in an instant. Right before Yi Ziwen's eyes, the golden-robed middle-aged man suddenly jumped and a blast of flames spread beneath his feet as if produced by the terrifying explosion of countless stars. This world is unkind to a myriad of things and treats weak as worthless. If I were to become the god of this world, I will certainly spread the notion of fair and justice and create eternal peace. Yi Shiwen. Yi Mo's loud shout echoed in Yi Ziwen's mind and forcibly pulled him out of the illusion. Yi Shiwen could not help but held his breath. Just now, he was completely trapped inside the illusion, and if Yi Mo hadn't stopped him, then he probably would have sunk deeper into the illusion, until his soul vanished without a trace. This place was indeed too weird, and at this time, Yi Shiwen was suddenly able to understand what was inscribed on the stone. It was written in esoteric seal characters of some ancient sect, but it was just a guess on his part since there was no proof available. He was still very perplexed after witnessing such a shocking scene inside that illusion. Judging from surging Yaoqi in the sky, it may be because of a mighty demon king's death. What I'm trying to say is that this place is the tomb of a demon king. Yi Mo said in a serious tone, Yi Shiwen, maybe this time we have come to a wrong place. If this place is really the tomb of a demon king, then it is absolutely one of the most deadly places between heaven and earth. Yi Shiwen frowned and said, fortunately, in the past, many people are said to have died in the conquest of the younger generation, but in comparison, not too many people died on the demon island. Maybe, but this place is a natural hunting ground. In the last few days, you have killed so many demon beasts, and several among them contained golden thread in their blood, although only a little, but enough to explain that they are immortals' descendants. And guess what? I have a way to extract the god's divinity from their blood, then you will be able to assimilate it into your body. That should help in upgrading your tyrant body technique and help you achieve the formidable golden body of gods. A supreme body and incomparably tough flesh, granting you enough strength to tear even the gods to shreds. Yi Mo couldn't hold the excitement surging inside his heart. How could he not when the god's power was right in front of their eyes? Yi Shiwen sighed and said, "This will not do. The divinity of a small truth-level demon beast can only slightly enhance my gilded tyrant form, and the overall progress is not even 1 out of 10,000. Yi Shiwen killed for 1 whole day and night, and he slaughtered only God's descendants, but in the end, the overall progress in gilded tyrant form was accountable to only 5 out of 10,000 parts. At this rate, he would have to kill tens of thousands of God's descendants of small truth realm in order to finish the practice of gilded tyrant form. Perhaps the time period of 1 year was not enough to finish gilded tyrant form. And this was the only chance to finish the practice of gilded tyrant form. After all, he was on the infamous demon island, and it was filled with opportunities in the form of God's descendants. If he was unable to complete this technique on the demon island, he might not find God's descendants elsewhere, and gilded tyrant form would end up being an unfinished technique. I say we find those mythical demon beasts of beyond the legendary realm, for example, the golden-winged eagle that we saw earlier. Yimo said with a smile. "Do you want me to die?" Yi Shiwen frowned and said, "Well, you do not need to go for those formidable beasts when you can always aim for their eggs or cubs. For now, let's start by targeting the young ones." Chapter 222 World Law Fragment, Roar. A demon beast's roar resounded throughout the forest, and the color of the skies suddenly faded when the huge figure of a flame bird flew across the sky. The places it flew over instantly caught fire, and it seemed as if the space itself was melting in its presence. Its dreadful roars were shaking the mountains. Yi Shiwen was hiding amidst a thick patch of grass and felt relieved when he looked towards the furious flame bird, which was, at this moment, flying away towards the horizon. In his arms, he was holding a big round egg, almost half his size. This flame bird was a descendant of Phoenix, an ancient god beast. Moreover, it was quite closely related as well. After reaching adulthood, a flame bird easily surmounted the legendary level. Yi Shiwen was greatly relieved and looked at the glowing red egg held gently in his bosom. This was a big harvest. In order to obtain this egg, it could be said that he had a narrow escape. Flame birds were very cautious while taking care of their own egg. Of course, because of the very tight security, most people simply couldn't get close. But since Yi Shiwen relied on the magical properties of restraining breath technique, so he was able to approach the egg and then quietly carry it away. Yi Shiwen found a cave, then gently put down the egg. In the dark cave, the egg was exuding a fiery light. Yi Shiwen did not hesitate to activate Tyrant Body technique and began to absorb the egg's essence. It could be seen that the flame bird's chick had not yet taken shape inside the egg. From the appearance, it just looked like a vague collection of the essence. Bye! Yi Shiwen heard a crisp sound, and a blazing red soul of the flame bird's chick, which flew out of the broken egg, was directly absorbed by him. Yi Ziwen's bronze-colored skin climbed up several levels while there appeared a faint trace of golden color on his skin. After all, Flame Bird was the descendant of an ancient beast and was not very far apart in bloodline. Although he didn't absorb the essence of an adult bird, but the inherent divinity contained in that egg was far beyond what he hoped to obtain by killing those other demon beasts earlier. According to his estimate, if he later killed an adult flame bird, then the divinity obtained from its body should be enough to complete the practice of gilded tyrant form in one fell swoop. However, it was an impossible task at his current level, since an adult flame bird was a beast of an entirely different realm, and even legendary level experts didn't stand a chance in front of it. In addition to divinity, there was no small energy contained in the egg, and once all of it was absorbed by him, his inner state slowly began to break. He had spent a long time on the Truth 4th stage, and even after practicing day and night, there was almost no sign of a breakthrough, but after absorbing the divinity present in the egg's essence, his stubbornly immobile cultivation finally started to break. The next morning, Yi Shiwen finally opened his eyes and there was an excited look on his face. After a night's time passed, he had finally completely refined the flame bird's egg. His body no longer appeared the same as earlier, and occasionally, traces of golden threads could be seen floating in his eyes. It seemed as if the absorbed golden threads were concentrated in his eyes, and whenever he activated Tyrant Body technique, his bright golden eyes flashed in the cave. Moreover, as he would continue to absorb divinity more and more, his entire body would be covered with a toughened golden layer, and by that time, when he would thoroughly carry out the gilded tyrant form, then his body would become incomparably tough and fearful. To be precise, the practice of tyrant body technique didn't start in Xiantian realm, but in the early stages of Hotian realm. So, usually, even though the body would become very tough at the end of practice, but the end result was generally completely different from the real thing. Tyrant body technique was an ancient martial art and had been created by an ancient tyrant king. It was a fearful technique, and the rumors said that its practitioner could actually slay gods and devils. Although tyrant body technique was an intrepid technique, but gilded tyrant form was its enhanced version, thereby making it even more dreadful. Others certainly didn't dare to randomly make changes to the martial arts left behind by predecessors, especially when tyrant body technique was such a high-handed martial art, but this was not the case for Yi Shiwen. Right after crossing the first layer of tyrant body technique, he began to figure out his own comprehension of the technique. Although he didn't know much about the original thing, but he believed that with the help of mysterious space, he should be able to comprehend this technique. Even though it might not become like the original, it would certainly not be inferior either. Since the beginning of second layer of tyrant body technique, Yi Shiwen began to have his own understanding and developed it in his own way. As a result, its comprehension reached unprecedented proportions, probably even more than that of the supreme master who invented it. After all, unlike him, Yi Shiwen had mysterious space which helped him to uncover and patch the loopholes. So, in the end, Yi Shiwen dared to join the rank of gods, and in doing so, he ended up developing his own technique, which he named Gilded Tyrant Form. Gilded Tyrant Form was a tyrannical technique, and when compared to Tyrant Body technique on the same level, it was much more terrifying. After all, the divine power of gods was used in it. Hence, its might was naturally going to be on an entirely different level. Yi Shiwen was confident about his practice thanks to his stock of countless Ling Dan and Spirit Stones. Compared to the beginning of the practice schedule for Gilded Tyrant Form, Yi Shiwen was more pleased to have finally taken the most important step towards reaching the pinnacle of Truth 5th stage, because his accumulation was really too vigorous, much more vigorous than anyone else. When he was at Truth 3rd stage, his battle strength had reached the peak level of Small Truth Realm, and after the breakthrough to Truth 4th stage, he had once again reached a satisfactory amount of accumulation, almost reaching the point where there should be a shift from quantitative to qualitative change, but there was still the need for a final push. And now with the help of Flame Bird's egg, the high-level life energy absorbed from it helped Yi Shiwen in finally attaining a qualitative change in his energy, and he crossed the threshold, ultimately stepping into Small Truth Realm. Now, his battle strength was enough to beat the experts of Truth 6th stage. This meant that Yi Shiwen finally entered the ranks of the strongest experts on the Demon Island. Not to forget that this time, almost 1,000 peerless geniuses had set foot on this island. And among them, of course, the experts of Truth 1st stage, 2nd stage, 3rd stage, 4th stage, and 5th stage were in majority. However, the experts of Small Truth Realm were a rare presence, not to mention there were only 20 to 30 experts of Truth 6th stage and above. Yi Shiwen had tasted the sweetness, and if he was able to complete the Gilded Tyrant Form, then his body would be toughened to what extent, no one could predict. However, since he relied on the egg's energy to have a breakthrough, so in the future, it would be difficult to reach the next breakthrough. Later, he would have to continue to accumulate in order to reach the next breakthrough. On this island, besides a terrifying creature like the Flame Bird, there were several other tyrannical creatures, not to mention they had cubs or eggs. Basically, they were going to help Yi Shiwen in perfecting Gilded Tyrant Form until he would transform into a fearful golden god. One could imagine the kind of fate those pups were going to suffer. But before Yi Shiwen could think more on this, suddenly, a loud ringing sound of bells began to transmit from a distant place, and along with that, a multicolored light scattered in the sky and enveloped the entire island, in the form of a terrifying enchantment barrier. Ding! Dong! Ding! The intermittent ringing sound of a melodious bell began to resound unceasingly throughout the demon island, and even the demon beasts were excited all of a sudden. Roar! 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 All of the demon beasts throughout the island were excited. They turned their faces towards the sky and began to give out long and loud roars as if trying to respond to the bell's call. "The island is closing up," Guillemot said. Yi Shiwen nodded. This also meant that they were about to enter the most brutal phase of fighting and competition on the island. During the year, no one would have any means to contact the outside world. They would have to rely only on themselves. At the same time, everyone would also slowly reveal true nature and get involved in unscrupulous battles. Sooner or later, the conquest for treasures would start. Then things would start to get bloodier and brutal. Everyone on the island was still immersed in the colorful rays of light when the ringing bells sealed the island. And a rumor immediately swept across the island. Apparently, some people found world law fragment within a sierra. Suddenly, this caused a sensation throughout the demon island. Perhaps experts of Xiantian realm might not know the significance of a law fragment, but that was not true for truth-level experts, especially not for the super-genius experts summoned on this island. Regardless of what level of pious life a person had led, they must come in contact of world laws to progress further. World laws and principles were more like the essence of everything between the heaven and the earth. In order to practice further, one must grasp the essence of world laws. This was also the only way to step into the legendary realm. There was no other way because the so-called truth realm was only a platform where one needed to prepare themselves for understanding the world laws. Legendary realm experts were actually the tyrannical experts who were able to comprehend world laws to a certain extent. Although the truth-level experts also comprehended world laws, but only to a very small extent. And it was only sufficient to help them rank up within the truth realm, but not enough to step into the legendary realm. The so-called half-step legendary experts could vaguely touch the world laws, but weren't able to fully touch. That's why they were still in a vague muddle-like realm and unable to step into the legendary realm. Just by relying on one's own insight, even peerless geniuses would find it extremely difficult and time-taking to comprehend world laws, which was the reason why there were several hundred true disciples in Yuan school but only a handful of legendary experts. To be continued. They speculated that this might be related to the separation of this island space from outside. When the island space was separated, several world laws were also cut apart and were left behind in the form of fragments. It was quite common for fissures to appear in space, and since these people were each top-level genius, of course, weren't ignorant like other people. They knew that all sorts of space cracks appeared in this world and many law fragments appeared in the surroundings of these space cracks. And over there, many people kept on waiting for the fragments to appear, but they mostly belonged to a big influence. Not to mention, these forces were tyrannical and weren't like a Yuan school that dominated only a small part of a state. Instead, they dominated an entire continent. Moreover, the space around those cracks had many threats. After all, there was no way to find out what kind of unknown world was present on the other side of the broken space. It might end being a terrifying world like the Devil World. All in all, even for them, the law fragments were too precious to lose. Not to mention, space surrounding the island was slowly consolidating, hence the law fragments were getting fewer and fewer. On the first day, 2 law fragments appeared at once, but now, they were appearing less and less often. Everyone was excited. While there was still anticipation in the eyes of everyone, the 9th piece of world law finally appeared. And even Yi Shiwen was looking forward to obtain this one. Because by observing Tianyuan Mirror, Yi Shiwen found out that the island space had completely consolidated and had stabled down, which also meant that it might be the last piece of law fragment. Do not have too high hopes, since you are not like them. Yi Mo smiled and said, "You are the next great devil king, so how can you possibly be like them? You must take the unprecedented path and must make your own path. Of course, this is a shortcut, but if you take it then your future achievement will be limited." Yi Mo had not given up on the plans of making Yi Shiwen the next great devil king, but Yi Shiwen ignored what he said just now because he was already accustomed to such talks. Almost every day, Yi Mo had been talking about it again and again, but from Yi Ziwen's indifferent attitude, it was apparent that he was not at all interested. They are a lot of people who will integrate the law fragment into the body, and on successful completion, the body will start resonating with the law. Yemo said, but integrating the law this way is actually a gamble of life and death. If the development potential of integrated law is stronger, then their future development potential will be stronger as well. However, if the development potential of integrated law is poor, then their future development potential will be nothing. But if the comprehended law is compatible with them, then later in the future, they can enjoy boundless prospects. Yemo explained. But still, I can refer to it, right? Yi Shiwen said. No matter what, regardless of whether I am going to use it or not, I have already decided to seize this 9th law fragment for myself. Yi Shiwen clenched his fist and said. Yi Shiwen and Yi Mo immediately rushed in the direction where the 9th piece had supposedly made an appearance. In a while, they arrived at a very large open space and saw the 9th law fragment floating in the sky. Die! Kill them all, this law fragment is mine. Numerous battle cries could be heard reverberating in the mountains, and in the forest, the corpses of over 100 experts could be seen lying on the ground. Various martial arts were rumbling in the field and magical tools could be seen dancing in the air. The whole scene simply resembled an Azura battlefield. This is more intense than we imagined. Yemo said. Yi Shiwen looked from afar and saw that Battling Heaven's Brotherhood was at war with another alliance, and at this time, two formidable leaders, namely Xiao Zhen and Lu Yueru, were going all out and were rapidly pressing the other alliance. Yi Shiwen felt somewhat strange when he didn't see Wu Xiaochuan. Now the Demon Island was bustling with dozens of alliances, large and small. The strongest among them was Eagle Union, with its weakest member being an expert of Truth 6th stage. Soon, the alliance, which was fighting with Battling Heaven's Brotherhood, realized that they weren't a match for the opposite party and quickly withdrew. Yi Shiwen was carefully observing the situation on the battlefield, but suddenly, a huge axe was thrown over towards him at a lightning speed and instantly arrived in front of him. Yi Shiwen hastily retreated few steps, and suddenly, a huge double-edged axe severely struck the ground and got embedded in the ground. With a loud bang, the surrounding land in the radius of few hundred meters trembled with shock. Yi Shiwen was suddenly furious since he almost avoided being chopped in half. This sneak attack was too outrageous. Yi Shiwen looked up and saw that it was none other than that skinny tribal youth whose pet tiger had been slaughtered by him. Yi Shiwen stared coldly at the skinny youth, who was also keeping a close eye on him. Then, Yi Shiwen slowly walked towards the double-edged axe, grabbed its handle and sent a burst of Zhenyuan into the tool in order to gain the control over it, then gave a cold glance to that skinny youth. Yi Shiwen immediately twisted his waist backwards and hurled the long axe. Shwa! 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 The huge axe went spinning and chopping the air like a fearful tornado, towards the skinny youth. This tornado was lightning fast since Yi Shiwen had quickly used some of the raw might of Gilded Tyrant form, while throwing the axe. Poochie! His blood, like a streaming fountain, splashed all over the ground, when the huge axe chopped him into two halves and stubbornly nailed itself to the ground. There was a look of shock and disbelief while he kept on staring at Yi Shiwen. He never imagined that Yi Shiwen would turn out to be so strong. Yi Shiwen, it's actually you, so you are really going to oppose us? Xiao Zhen's frightening roar echoed throughout the battlefield. Right before his eyes, Yi Shiwen directly killed the skinny youth, and this was no different from throwing a severe slap on his face. Isn't he? Lu Yueru muttered when she clearly recognized Yi Shiwen. Wu Xiaochuan invited this boy to stay with them, but he left soon afterwards, and later she heard that some trouble occurred and he broke off his relation with Battle Heaven's Brotherhood and never appeared again. But this time, even the members of Battling Heaven's Brotherhood appeared confused when they saw Yi Shiwen. After all, in front of their eyes, he killed their comrade. No matter how one looked at this, it was apparent that he was not a friend. It's quite simple. You see, he wanted to kill me, so I killed him. It's that simple. Yi Shiwen said indifferently, but there was a brutal look in his eyes. Then he slowly walked towards the Central Committee of Battling Heaven's Brotherhood, as if dozens of other members simply didn't exist at all. He approached the leaders of the Brotherhood and bravely stood right in front of them. Chapter 224, Completely Suppressed. It's quite simple. You see, he wanted to kill me, so I killed him. It's that simple. Yi Shiwen said indifferently, but there was a brutal look in his eyes. Then he slowly walked towards the Central Committee of Battling Heaven's Brotherhood, as if dozens of other members simply didn't exist at all. He approached the leaders of the Brotherhood and bravely stood right in front of them. Do you really want to fight with us and treat us like your enemy? Xiao Zhen asked coldly. Your enemy? It seems like you are repeatedly trying to start a fight with me. Yi Shiwen said with disdain. He wasn't some weakling who would lie down and take punches. Yi Shiwen looked at the law fragment which was floating above the center of the field. It was exuding a faint pattern of light. Yi Shiwen indifferently said, I will take this law fragment and consider it as an apology from your side. How dare you? Xiao Zhen was suddenly furious. They were the first to obtain news about Ninth Fragment's appearance, and then they had to fight and win an arduous battle to obtain it. And now, this Yi Shiwen actually wanted to take it away from him? Yi Shiwen, first you kill our comrade, and now you are trying to snatch away this hard-earned law fragment. Have you gone out of your mind? At this time, Lu Yueru said, after all, Yi Shiwen was somehow related to Wu Xiaochuan, so she tried her best to not sound very rude. This is a law fragment. You and I are well aware of its value. As long as you hand it over to me, I am willing to write off the resentment between us. Yi Shiwen indifferently said, as if we will listen to you. Xiao Zhen was extremely furious and his figure instantly turned into a streamer of light as he rushed towards Yi Shiwen. The long sword in his hand released a terrifying sword light, which instantly arrived in front of Yi Shiwen. Gilded Tyrant Form. Yi Shiwen instantly activated Gilded Tyrant Form, and his entire body turned bronze in color. In the sunlight, it seemed as if he was a reincarnation of an ancient god. Yi Shiwen raised his hand, which transformed into a claw and directly crushed that sword light to smithereens, while at the same time, his other palm turned into a dragon. The huge dragon opened its mouth and flew toward Xiao Zhen. Xiao Zhen barely managed to evade this attack, and that huge dragon nipped on the piece of ground, where he was standing an instant ago, and blasted a big hole in the ground. Well, I never thought that I was actually mistaken about your strength. Xiao Zhen was short of breath and said with an anxious smile, not just me, everyone is mistaken about your strength, including Wu Xiaochuan. I didn't expect that your actual strength would be so profound. Xiao Zhen never thought that Yi Shiwen would actually be so powerful that even a Truth 6th-stage expert like him would feel overwhelmed. However, since he never realized it before, so there was a feeling of being fooled in his heart. But your luck will stop here, because making an enemy out of battling Heaven's Brotherhood is your biggest mistake. Xiao Zhen roared and rushed towards Yi Shiwen, while simultaneously releasing a terrifying sword light towards him. By this time, Gilded Tyrant Form had been mobilized to the extreme, and Yi Shiwen looked like an ancient overlord reborn. His overwhelming imposing aura instantly overran towards Xiao Zhen. Sword light and domineering imposing aura maliciously hit together. Boom! Accompanied with a loud noise and layer after layer of shock waves, an incomparably bright light swept away in all directions. Boom! A big hole instantly appeared on the ground where the explosion took place. Yi Ziwen's bronze skin was glowing in the sun, and there was a trace of golden color in it, making him appear like a divine being, a golden god of war. Everyone froze when they witnessed this scene, especially the people of battling Heaven's Brotherhood. Some of them knew Yi Shiwen but never expected that he would be able to defeat their boss. Boom! 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 Both sides mercilessly and relentlessly shot. Yi Ziwen's palm transformed into a dragon, and without giving an opportunity to Xiao Zhen to react, it completely suppressed him. Xiao Zhen was depressed because he never thought that he would be suppressed like this by Yi Shiwen. This was like the most ridiculous joke in the entire world. He never thought that Yi Shiwen, a guy whom he underestimated and simply never paid attention to, would thoroughly suppress him like this. The two men went all the way into the woods, and were as fast as lightning, fighting along the way and destroying everything in their path. Their violent and immense energy was destroying the surrounding forest bit by bit. Complexions of the members of Battling Heaven's Brotherhood suddenly paled. Such a battle was extremely terrifying, although they were also known as gifted disciples, but could never dare of being the opponents of those two. These two men were insanely powerful, to the extent that the ordinary experts of Truth's 6th stage weren't their match. In other words, these two could be considered as super experts even on the Truth's 6th stage. And Yi Shiwen could be called the king of the experts of Truth's 6th stage. Xiao Zhen's incredible fearful longsword was capable of destroying the hardest of defenses, but Yi Shiwen was even more fearful. He actually stopped this long sword with his bare hands, which actually left Xiao Zhen in an unbearable panic-stricken state. What kind of dreadful body was this? Unexpectedly, his sword light was unable to put even a scratch on Yi Ziwen's body. Yi Ziwen's invincible body was just like an absolute impenetrable defense. Bang! 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 Yi Ziwen's palm attack gave rise to a wind blade which fiercely clashed with Xiao Zhen's long sword, and the horrifying force made him tremble, making him lose his footing. Bang! Xiao Zhen was sent flying several miles away, hitting several ancient towering trees on the way. This scene made so many people look incredibly at Yi Shiwen, as if they were looking at a monster. They were well aware of the fact that Xiao Zhen was a very powerful man and undoubtedly deserved to be their leader, but just because they knew this, therefore they couldn't ignore Yi Ziwen's tyrannical strength, which was able to suppress their leader to such an extent. Yi Shiwen instantly flew forward, chasing after Xiao Zhen's flying body, and a large dragon claw suddenly collided with Xiao Zhen's long sword. The sword exploded and split into fearful rays of light that immediately swept off and spread in all directions. Xiao Zhen was also hit by the fearful blast and spat out a mouthful of blood. But at this time, Lu Yueru finally made a move and instantly waved her long blue sword, throwing a blue sword key towards Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen took a casual sidestep and effortlessly evaded that sword key. Yi Shiwen stood there firm like a mountain and slowly turned his face towards Lu Yueru. Her complexion suddenly paled as she never wanted to attack him, she was just trying to save Xiao Zhen. She then clenched her fists and lightly said, "Yi Shiwen, since you want this law fragment, then we won't take it. I hope it's possible to write off the grudge between us with this." Hearing Lu Yueru's words, Xiao Zhen was depressed to the point of vomiting blood, but he also knew that she was right. Yi Shiwen was extremely terrifying, and no one in the entire Battling Heaven Brotherhood could possibly dream of taking him on. Only he knew the feeling of terror and dread he had to go through just now while facing Yi Shiwen. It was like facing a violent storm head-on, which made him choke several times. He was doing his best to survive, as his battle with Yi Shiwen was no different from a desperate battle for survival. Just for the sake of survival, he would have to give up on the law fragment. He had been the leader of the younger generation for several years, but in front of Yi Shiwen, he collapsed at the first blow. Yi Shiwen seemed entirely different from before, and this aggrieved his heart even more. However, Xiao Zhen knew that her words were right. If Yi Shiwen lost his cool, then he would really end up obliterating their entire existence. Not to forget, on the Demon Island, there were no elders to save their asses from Yi Shiwen. The strong commandeered the world while the weak became their game. It was that simple. Yi Shiwen didn't care about what they were really thinking. Although Xiao Zhen was powerful, but according to Yi Shiwen, he still wasn't an opponent of the 8th Prince. Yi Shiwen had a profound impression of the 8th Prince's strength. Yi Shiwen was impatient about enhancing his own strength. Yi Ziwen's strength was at the peak of Truth's 6th stage, and if he was to fight the 8th Prince at his current strength, then he would be at great disadvantage. But if Yi Shiwen continued to enhance his cultivation on the Demon Island as planned, then it would be hard to guess his level until his next meeting with the 8th Prince. After hearing Lu Yueru's words, Yi Shiwen lightly said, "As long as you do not cause any trouble for me, I will naturally let you go." Lu Yueru understood what Yi Shiwen meant. The fear of Yi Shiwen was deeply embedded in her heart, not mention it had intensely impacted on her mind as well. Yi Ziwen's reservoirs were too deep and profound. Earlier, when he arrived with Wu Shaochuan, he was still at Truth 4th stage and his aura was quite ordinary, but now, All of a sudden, she came to know that it was all fake. Was it seriously possible for a fourth-stage expert to dominate a sixth-stage expert? But what she did not know that earlier, Yi Shiwen really wasn't her opponent. Chapter 225 Law Crushed. Where is Wu Shaochuan? Why is he not with you people? Yi Shiwen asked in a dull voice. At the mention of this, Lu Yura's complexion slightly changed as she said, there was a clash of opinion between him and us, so he left. Just from the look on her face, Yi Shiwen guessed that something was off, but he did not interrogate further. At this time, the crowd suddenly exclaimed that the law fragment had started to distort as if trying to escape from there and return to the place where it really belonged. The crowd continued to shout and looked extremely anxious, but at this time, Yi Shiwen finally jumped up and flew straight towards the law fragment, stretched out his hand and grabbed it. Stabs! The anomalous fragment abruptly cut a terrible wound on Yi Ziwen's palm. When the spectators saw Yi Shiwen directly reaching out to grab the law fragment, suddenly, the feeling of exultation spread in their hearts. After all, they were going to see how Yi Shiwen would be torn to pieces by the fragment. One must know that this was no ordinary glass fragment or something, but a real space fragment. It didn't originate from a material existence but directly separated from the physical existence of space. Just like a person's shadow in a mirror that looked intact when the mirror was intact. But as soon as the mirror was broken, the entire person's figure was also fragmented and changed back to the reality. No one would dare to directly grasp a law fragment. This was the reason why Battling Heaven's Brotherhood had made a lot of preparations. They had brought several magical tools to catch this law fragment. How could someone directly hold a law fragment? It was as if this person was courting death. But irrespective of what they assumed, Yi Shiwen was not torn to pieces. Only his palm was slightly injured and bleeding, although he quite awkwardly dropped from the sky to the ground, but was still standing and looked all right. This suddenly caused commotion in the surrounding crowd. My God, how is he able to hold a law fragment in his hand? He looks like an ancient mythical god reborn. He is too fearful. How can he possess such a tyrannical body? No wonder he was able to suppress our chief from the outset. Having this kind of flesh is really insane. What we are witnessing is a miracle, isn't it? Nobody could achieve such a feat, at least they had not seen anyone do it before, but Yi Shiwen did it right in front of their eyes and suddenly shocked the members of Battling Heaven's Brotherhood. In fact, at this time, even the words weren't coming out of their mouths, including the latest stepping stone, Xiao Zhen, who appeared quite depressed and was looking at Yi Shiwen with a baffled look in his eyes. Yi Ziwen's bright red blood sprayed out from his palm, and actually contained a trace of golden thread. It was the result of divinity refined and assimilated by Yi Shiwen in his body. At this time, Yi Shiwen was incomparably amazed since this law fragment was too horrifying. Even though he was well prepared, with a protective cover of Zhen Yuan on his body, and he had also activated Tyrant Body Technique, but his palm was still instantly cut open. Xiao Zhen's sword light was unable to put even a scratch on his hand, but this blade law fragment was incredibly terrifying. Moreover, without feeling a shred of resistance, it instantly cut through his defenses and inflicted a cut wound on his palm. Like in his previous life, Yi Shiwen used to easily cut through a piece of plastic foam with his finger, without feeling any resistance. Perhaps the fearfulness of Tyrant Body Technique was beyond the comprehension of this world, but even so, its defense was easily cut open by the law fragment, cutting all the way to the bones. If Yi Shiwen had not immediately activated Gilded Tyrant form and used the power of divinity, then his palm might have been chopped off by now. However, if Tyrant Body Technique was practiced to its peak level, then it was possible for the practitioner to use bare hands for tearing off space, but right now, Yi Ziwen's skill was not that high. Let alone tearing the space with bare hands, his palm was almost cut off by a law fragment. Fortunately, Yi Shiwen managed to escape from this tragedy, and the credit would entirely go to the divinity. The law fragment was struggling in vain and trying to escape. From the instant it was separated from the space, it was a separate entity with its own consciousness. If it could run away and find a place to hide, then after tens of thousands of years, Perhaps, it would take the shape of an incomparably fearful expert with in-depth knowledge about the world law lingering inside it. Bang! The law fragment suddenly broke free from Yi Zaiwen's grasp, and his blood spattered as it took off instantly and fled towards the horizon. Look, the law fragment is escaping. I wonder what Yi Shiwen will do next. Even the law fragment doesn't like him. Exactly. Several members of Battling Heaven's Brotherhood laughed and ridiculed him. As for them, it was the only thing they could do to retaliate against Yi Shiwen. However, Xiao Zhen and Lu Yueru were stubbornly staring at Yi Shiwen, eagerly waiting to see what he would do next. Yi Shiwen was not in a mood to come to terms with that law fragment. As soon as it escaped, he also immediately flew towards it, and his hand instantly transformed into a huge coiling dragon. The coiling dragon was enveloped in a golden-colored light because of the divinity mixed with Zhen Yuan, and made it seem as if the dragon god himself had descended in this world. Yi Zaiwen's dragon claw was like a raging sea, scratching and tearing the world. A plume of divinity spread in the sky, and at that moment, it directly caught the law fragment. The divine element and law fragment had a fierce friction with each other in the hand of Yi Shiwen, and terrifying intermittent explosions took place as if resembling the birth of the universe. Using the divinity to firmly bind a law fragment was something only Yi Shiwen could achieve. It was simply unimaginable for other people to accomplish this. Everyone was shocked because they never thought that Yi Shiwen would actually be valiant enough to once again catch and directly hold the fleeing law fragment in his hand. His body, is it really a human body? It's like he has transplanted the body of a devil in his own body. He is incredibly strong. I wonder who can be his match later? With such strength, he can definitely be called a supreme-level expert in the younger generation. No one will dare to grasp a law fragment in their hand, but he actually did, which is simply unimaginable. Yi Shiwen grasped the law fragment in his hand and crushed it. In a flash, the law fragment crumpled and left everyone in a stunned state. Everyone was dumbfounded when they witnessed the law fragment being crushed to a powdered state in Yi Zaiwen's palm. A law in itself was not visible to human eyes, but as a fragment, it was very hard and sharp. Even a simple touch of law fragment could be fatal. But Yi Shiwen extraordinarily dared to grasp it. Moreover, he conveniently crushed it as if it was nothing. Immediately, countless people exclaimed because this was simply a crime in their eyes. This was not just a casual heavenly treasure, but a precious law fragment. After all, it was a treasure which could help them in stepping into the legendary realm. Witnessing this kind of treasure, for them, was an extremely rare case that appeared only once in 100 years, and even if they could not obtain it, why waste it like this? Right in front of their eyes, Yi Zaiwen ruined a rare and extremely precious treasure. Chapter 226, Overnight Fame. If you want to step into the legendary realm, then you must spend decades finding answers to the questions posed by the secrets of world laws, and you must successfully manage to answer all of the featured questions over the years in order to pass the test. However, just now, the same priceless list of questions had been torn to pieces by Yi Shiwen. Wasting such a valuable treasure, in the eyes of everyone, was a serious crime. But in Yi Zaiwen's opinion, crushing this law fragment was no big deal, especially because he had mysterious space in his mind and it could help him in restructuring the broken information, then he could completely absorb and comprehend it. Yi Shiwen chose to crush the law fragment because keeping it intact was too dangerous. While he was holding it in his hand, it continued to cut and injure his palm, and if he was not careful, then it might cut through his whole body. He also knew that Battling Heaven's Brotherhood would surely spread the news about this incident, and it might attract tyrannical experts to track him down. So, he decided to destroy the law fragment in front of everyone. On the Demon Island, a lot of tyrannical experts had formed alliances. For example, the Eagle Union consisted of several experts of Truth 7 stage, a few experts of Truth 8 stage, and some terrifying existences of above Truth 8 stage as well. And even the weakest members were at Truth 6 stage. However, was this really the extent of the current younger generation? Yi Shiwen did not believe in that. After all, he had seen that Taoist priest earlier, but was unable to see through the priest's cultivation level. He was using a high-level agility skill and must have had a very high cultivation level. Yi Shiwen believed that there were a lot of hidden experts like him on this island, and just to be on the safe side, he didn't want to attract their attention. Not to forget, the 8th prince had not yet made an appearance. There was a possibility that he was hiding somewhere on the island and practicing, probably waiting for an opportunity to kill Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen didn't want to waste time on these things. He would prefer exploring this mysterious demon island. He had spent a month's time on this island but only explored the peripheral zones. He still didn't know what was present in the depths of the demon island. While holding the crumpled debris of law fragment in his hand, Yi Shiwen flew away from there and soon disappeared in the horizon. Although the members of Battling Heaven's Brotherhood were filled with hate and grinding their teeth, but no one dared to pursue Yi Shiwen. After all, when a tyrannical expert like Lu Yueru chose not to battle with Yi Shiwen, then how could they possibly think about going after him? The impression of Yi Ziwen's incredible strength was deeply seared in their hearts. The news about the 9th law fragment instantly attracted the attention of many people. Excluding the 2 law fragments that fell into the hands of demon beasts, a total of 6 law fragments were seized by human experts. And now, they were shocked to find out from the members of Battling Heaven's Brotherhood that the 9th law fragment was actually seized by a boy named Yi Shiwen. But Yi Ziwen's name became famous overnight. Counting out Wu Shaochuan, there were 2 peerless experts of Truth's 6th stage in Battling Heaven's Brotherhood, making it one of the strongest alliances on the Demon Island. This was just like stealing food out of a tiger's mouth. The news about Xiao Zhen's pathetic defeat at the hands of Yi Shiwen really shocked the entire Demon Island. Not to mention, in the presence of so many members of Battling Heaven's Brotherhood, the 2 leaders of the alliance willingly handed over the law fragment to Yi Shiwen. Just what kind of strength could make it possible? Eventually, the rumors put Yi Shiwen among the numerous powerhouses of the Demon Island. However, the news about Yi Shiwen crushing the law fragment made everyone jump up from shock. If he didn't want it, then why did he have to waste it like this? They were cursing Yi Shiwen for such a foolish act, but they couldn't overlook the fact that he was formidable enough to hold a law fragment in his hand and casually crush it. This was a solid proof that he was indeed incredibly strong. No mortal could do such a thing and survive. In their eyes, Yi Shiwen suddenly became a very mystical and horrifying existence, and at the same time, there were several experts who put down the thought of looking for Yi Shiwen. Once a law fragment was broken, it turned completely useless, as if tearing an exam question paper to shreds. And who would go looking for a tyrannical powerhouse who was capable of crushing a law fragment? In the end, things turned out just the way Yi Shiwen wanted. Anyway, in order to use a law fragment, one would need to be at least at half-step legendary level, and on this island, there were no experts of such level, and even if there were, no one dared to entertain such a terrifying idea. Just the way elderly fishermen did not dare to entertain the idea of monstrous tides, waiting to ambush them in the sea. Somewhere on the Demon Island, the 8th prince, clad in royal clothes, was sitting in a cave and practicing an outstanding technique. The shadowy figures of an azure dragon, a phoenix, a white tiger and a black tortoise were unceasingly glittering around the 8th prince while his aura was getting more and more formidable with each breath. After hearing the rumor about Yi Shiwen, suddenly a cold smile appeared on his face. I will let him enjoy for some time. His voice echoed throughout the cave. Since others could not comprehend from a crushed law fragment did not mean that Yi Shiwen couldn't comprehend either. He had the help of mysterious space, which could help him in reconstructing and comprehending shattered or lost information. The only thing needed for that was Ling Qi, and now with the help of upgraded Tianyuan mirror, the daily production rate of Ling Dawn had increased from 500 to 700. For ordinary martial techniques, this was enough, but not for comprehending a world law. The fundamental principles of this world were actually the final analysis of a particular phenomenon. For example, the sun always sets in the west was one law, water always flows from higher gravitational potential to lower gravitational potential was another law, but none of the above-mentioned laws explained the real reasons behind the phenomena. However, in the legendary realm, experts try to understand world laws to a deeper level by tackling the questions such as why water flowed downhill instead of going uphill. And for other experts, it might be very difficult to figure out the real reason behind these laws, but the same was not true for Yi Shiwen. This time, being a person from the earth was his biggest advantage in this world. Although there were a lot of powerhouses in this world, but very few of them were inquisitive and took their own strength for granted, never questioning why they possessed such strength. All they needed to do was follow their predecessors in order to enhance their strength. There was a constant ongoing race with time in which they needed to cultivate and enhance their cultivation level, and at the same time, they needed to comprehend various martial techniques. They just needed to reach a certain level and comprehend martial techniques, even at the cost of not really knowing the reason behind them. It was not like they didn't want to know, instead did not need to know, because the time was a very tight factor during their practice. Xiantian level experts only had a lifespan of 200 years, and it was even less for Hotian level experts. There was no time for the experts to thoroughly understand each and every theory they were practicing. They were just following the path followed by their predecessors. In short, they were first focusing on cultivation and increasing their lifespan and would consider understanding things on a deeper level later on. It was just like the exam-oriented education system from Yi Ziwen's previous life. The college entrance examination was a node, and there was a total of 12 years from the beginning of elementary school education till the college entrance examination. As soon as you enroll in the school, the countdown of 12 years to college entrance examination begins. The teachers will begin to fill various types of concepts in your head, and it doesn't matter whether you understand them or not. You must deal with several intermediate examinations until you ultimately face the college entrance examination. But in this world, the node was life itself. A martial artist's life was long when compared to an ordinary person, but in order to achieve longer lifespan, they must cultivate and keep on practicing, and they were always short of time, so most of the time, it was necessary to give up on something to gain something necessary. And after stepping into the legendary realm, they finally started to catch up by cramming up ferociously. They must begin to study very thoroughly, even about the easiest of laws, and must find answers to the simplest of questions such as why does the sun set in the west? This was a huge shift in practice style, and not everyone could withstand this abrupt transformation. This was the problem of so-called fixed thinking, so only a small number of people could get used to this reversed notion, then continued to practice on the long road leading to a pious life. However, there was a shortcut to all this, and it was none other than the law fragment. A law fragment was like an encyclopedia, although some people never understood why the sun sets in the west, but they could still manage to find out from the encyclopedia that the reason was actually the Earth's rotation. A long time ago, someone did a lot of research and concluded that Earth's rotation was the reason why the sun sets in the west. Now, anyone could just read the conclusion in a book and understand the reason behind this law, so there was no need for self-comprehension anymore. Moreover, this was a question of ideas and could be reversed very easily. But for Yi Shiwen, this kind of thing was normal, although he did not possess formidable strength in his past life, but he had an inquisitive attitude. He was a curious guy in the past life and knew the importance of getting to the bottom of something in order to understand it better. Therefore, Yi Shiwen had an advantage over others, and because of this, even though he seized a law fragment, it would still not hinder him from being inquisitive. The crushed law fragment was absorbed into the mysterious space, then Yi Shiwen began to burn a lot of Ling Dawn, which then transformed into Lingqi and was injected into the mysterious space, little by little. This began to reorganize the sudden influx of information bit by bit. Chapter 227 Shuffles. Yi Shiwen spent almost 1 month in an unceasing absorption of the law fragment in powdered state. During this month, the entire Demon Island was in a state of turmoil. It was a chaotic time of conquests, and just because of the appearance of law fragments. 90% of truth-level disciples were deeply attracted towards law fragments, and reason was the sudden appearance of 9 law fragments. Excluding the 9th one, which was directly crushed by Yi Shiwen under the watchful eyes of several disciples, 2 law fragments had fallen into the grasp of formidable demon beasts. The remaining 6 were all up for grabs and resulted in several battles. As Yi Shiwen had previously guessed, several fierce experts were really hiding on this island. And during the contest for law fragments, there appeared a large number of horrifying experts of more than Truth's 6th stage. Except the Eagle Union, the other 5 alliances that had managed to obtain a law fragment each were completely under siege from several other hidden destructive forces and undercover terrifying experts. This led to the destruction of many alliances, and in the end, these law fragments ended up in the grasp of the strongest. The Eagle Union was actually very stable. A group of people went looking for trouble, but the result was their own thorough annihilation instead. Henceforth, everyone approved that Eagle Union was the strongest alliance on the entire island and no one should provoke them. Some people tried searching for Yi Zaiwen but were unable to find him because they couldn't find his trailers if he was a ghost or something. Moreover, since he had crushed that law fragment, so they could only bitterly give up. After Yi Shiwen departed from there was a severe infighting among the members of Battling Heaven's Brotherhood, and as a result of that, the alliance completely dissolved. Afterwards, Xiao Zhen and Lu Yueru had a dramatic dispute, and Lu Yueru departed. In the end, Xiao Zhen led the remaining people to seek refuge in one true alliance. This was the first reshuffle on the Demon Island and cropped up some of the original hidden forces, but Yi Shiwen knew that this would not be the last reshuffle because there were several horrifying experts still waiting and watching from shadows. They were not much attracted to the law fragments. After all, a year's time was left till the reopening of the island and early exposure wasn't a good thing. Only those who get the last laugh are considered the winners. It was conceivable that there would be a terrible upheaval before the reopening of the Demon Island. Yi Shiwen did not want to be a part of this reshuffle. He was more interested in exploring the island's depths. But Yi Shiwen did not go directly to the island's depths since he was looking for Wu Xiaochuan. During the reshuffle, Yi Shiwen finally heard news about Wu Xiaochuan and decided to go and meet him. He was also worried about Hua Menghan and Qin Ruochen because he got no news about them. He was hoping that Wu Xiaochuan would help him in getting information about their whereabouts. There was a stretch of several log cabins in a square, and Wu Xiaochuan was living in one of those cabins. Occasionally, terrifying beastly roars were coming from very far place. After arriving here, Yi Shiwen had a feeling of coming to the paradise with a peaceful and serene atmosphere. Yi Shiwen didn't approach, just deactivated restraining breath technique. Wu Xiaochuan sensed Yi Shiwen standing outside and immediately came out of his cabin. With a look of pleasant surprise on his face, he laughed and said, "Yi Shiwen, what brings you here?" "Of course, I have come to meet you." "Why did you leave Battling Heaven's Brotherhood?" Yi Shiwen asked. "I left because of that sly Xiao Zhen. He was secretly planning something behind the scenes and was about to start a war for power and his person profit. If not for giving face to Lu Yueru, I would have surely butchered him." Wu Xiaochuan answered, and this really surprised Yi Shiwen. This was the first time he witnessed Wu Xiaochuan's crazy side, which was quite contrasting to his usual jolly attitude. "But I knew that Battling Heaven's Brotherhood won't last long under his leadership. Yi Shiwen, you have become very famous these days. The whole island knows your name. Damn bro, you are really ruthless, actually crushed a law fragment." Wu Xiaochuan smiled and said, "It's such an honor to have a friend who has come from so far to visit us." Suddenly, a voice sounded from a nearby log cabin and a young Taoist priest came out from there. Yi Shiwen noticed that he was the same Taoist priest he saw earlier. "Taoist priest, the pleasure is all mine." Yi Shiwen cupped his hands and said, "Yi Shiwen, meet Qing Su." Wu Xiaochuan introduced them. "You can call me Qing Su and I'll just call you Yi Shiwen." Taoist priest was surprisingly not attaching any importance to superficial formalities. For Yi Shiwen, it was still very difficult to see through Qing Zu's cultivation. Even though his own cultivation level had increased since the last meeting, but he was again unable to sense Qing Zu's cultivation level. "How come you two are together?" Yi Shiwen asked. "We do not want to join any alliance, so we all decided to live in the same place and watch each other's back." Wu Xiaochuan smiled and said, "Wait, so there were more than just these two living here?" Yi Shiwen was now curious. since it looked like a small group of people who didn't want to be a part of any alliance. But Yi Shiwen did know that this was no ordinary group. Wu Shaochuan was at the peak of Truth's 6th stage, and even after the recent shuffling, he could be counted among the top experts on the island. But Qing Su was on a whole other level and would be counted among the handful of terrifying existences. Well, why don't you join us here? I think your strength is sufficient enough to be one of us. Not to mention, if Yi Shiwen was able to obtain a law fragment, then it should be rather easier for Yu Yi to get his hands on one. Now, Yu Yi had sufficient time to consume the treasures he obtained from the ancient ruins. It was tough to guess the extent of his strength when he would appear in front of Yi Shiwen the next time. Hence, Yi Shiwen was eager to perfect gilded tyrant form before that. Wu Shaochuan was somewhat amazed, immediately raised up his thumb and said, "Terrific, this is even easier. I know about the existence of Great Yu State's Imperial Guards and Yu Yi, the peerless genius who leads it. It seems you are going to teach this guy a good lesson. Not bad." Wu Shaochuan actually said in a way as if he was taking pleasure in others' misfortunes. You are this younger generation's top genius, and that Xiao Zhen is nothing in comparison. As long as you are willing to give your loyalty to our chief, you will certainly obtain more than just a law fragment from him. Jiang Hua said with pride. Yi Shiwen laughed. After all, this law fragment had been seized by him and belonged to him, but according to Jiang Hua's logic, his chief would gift it to Yi Shiwen. What kind of ridiculous logic was this? Well, excuse me, I'm not interested. Yi Shiwen refused. You cannot reject. Jiang Hua's complexion suddenly darkened as he coldly stared at Yi Shiwen, as if he committed a sin just now and wouldn't be forgiven for this crime. I have no interest in joining any alliance. Yi Shiwen replied. Earlier, Wu Shaochuan invited him to join their small group, but he said no, not to mention this was some random alliance and his enemy, Xiao Zhen, was also in this alliance. Once our union decides to recruit someone, they cannot refuse. Jiang Hua's face revealed indifference as he coldly uttered these words. Jiang Hua looked coldly at Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen also coldly stared at him, and as they continued this staring game, there was a sudden burst of aura from Jiang Hua's side, and the dreadful aura instantly enveloped Yi Shiwen. Jiang Hua knew that Yi Shiwen was an extremely powerful expert, otherwise his chief wouldn't send him, the deputy chief of their alliance, to personally come and invite Yi Shiwen. Even among the top geniuses of the 10 countries of Southeast region, Yi Shiwen was considered the most outstanding. Such a peerless genius was usually very hard to deal with, but he knew what he must do. He must thoroughly defeat Yi Shiwen in order to crush his pride and self-confidence, thereby taming him in the process. Such threats don't work on me. Yi Shiwen grinned and a cold light flashed in his eyes. And what is this one true alliance? Never heard of it. If you want to die so badly, I'll help you out. Jiang Hua said in an angry tone and looked at Yi Shiwen with his ice-cold eyes, while his killing intention was overflowing. Destruction of the gods' tactics. Jiang Hua's temperament instantly changed and a dreadful killing intention surged out of his body, making him appear like the incarnation of an ancient evil god. Jiang Hua's internal qi generation engine was operating at its peak, while the terrible rays of light spread everywhere. The entire mountain forest began to quiver under the dominating pressure of the terrifying power of Truth's 7th peak. Yi Shiwen shouted and instantly activated Tyrant Body Technique. His whole body was immediately covered in bronze flesh, and the faint golden light was glowing in the sunlight, making him look like the incarnation of an ancient overlord. Boom! Jiang Hua's fingertips flashed and shot a huge divine beam at Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen instantly shot his palm, and a coiling dragon, overflowing with terrifying dragon qi, appeared out of nowhere and roared loudly. Yi Shiwen was secretly vigilant in his heart. This guy was at the peak of Truth's 7th stage and could be considered one of the strongest in the younger generation of all 10 countries of Southeast region. No wonder he was so confident. However, even such a person had been tamed by someone. Yi Shiwen was quite curious to find out who actually was the chief of one true union. But he must first think of a way to escape from this psycho. The coiling dragon roared and flew towards the incoming divine beam. Bang! The coiling dragon severely clashed with the divine beam and ripped it apart, rendering it useless. Then it opened its large jaws and rushed towards Jianghua to swallow him whole. Jianghua snorted and said, "Evil dragon." His fingertips flashed again and released 10 divine beams towards the coiling dragon. These tyrannical beams of divine light attacked it and tore it to shreds. At this time, Yi Shiwen suddenly appeared in front of Jianghua, coldly smiled and said, "Now die." Yi Shiwen shot his palm, which immediately transformed into a giant dragon claw and maliciously rumbled on Jianghua's chest. Boom! A loud explosion occurred and set off strong winds in all directions and directly bulldozed numerous trees in the forest. The destructive power of these two experts was extremely frightening. Jianghua looked solemn as he said, "You are a very good fighter, actually compelled me to use my best shot. But rest assured I will definitely kill you." However, in his heart, Jianghua was shocked and never expected Yi Shiwen to be so formidable. One must know that he had already used his best shot and was unable to hurt Yi Shiwen. And at the same time, he could see the strange look in Yi Shiwen's eyes, as if conveying, "You want to kill me?" Yi Shiwen grinned and his eyes looked even colder than before. His body resembled those of the ancient tyrants, incomparably tyrannical. Jianghua was secretly horrified in his heart because he knew well that if he was not a higher-level expert then he would probably be dead by now. "You are very strong, but this actually increases the fun. Killing a formidable enemy will prove my strength," Jianghua said softly and step by step walked in the air. Yi Shiwen immediately took out Tianyuan mirror, which made a scarlet protective screen around him. Jianghua suddenly blasted a punch which shook the surrounding space. Boom! The Quanjin rumbled fiercely on the protective screen, but it only trembled a bit and didn't collapse. Yi Shiwen did not wait and immediately shot his palm, which transformed into a dragon claw and then rumbled maliciously on Jianghua's body. Boom! A terrible explosion occurred in the sky. Bang! Jianghua was sent flying hundreds of meters away. Blood was dripping from the corners of his mouth since his internal organs had been damaged. How could he possibly know that Yi Shiwen used the power of gilded tyrant form? Although Jianghua's cultivation was at a higher level, but he was still injured by the aftermath of this explosion. Although Yi Shiwen had used Tianyuan Mirror's protective screen but was still sent flying by the explosion, an incredible look appeared in Jianghua's eyes. He just couldn't believe what he witnessed just now. How could Yi Ziwen's body be so terrifying? He initially planned to rely on his higher level to effortlessly kill Yi Shiwen, but what the hell happened just now? In a protracted battle, Yi Shiwen would end up consuming his energy and should be at a disadvantage, but he still couldn't overlook Yi Ziwen's tyrannical flesh. He couldn't understand how Yi Shiwen managed to attain such a body. It was basically impossible to find a same-level rival for Yi Shiwen. But then a killing intention again flashed in his eyes. He knew that he must strangle this threat ahead of time. Otherwise, in the future, Yi Shiwen might become a formidable enemy. Chapter 229, Struggles hard to escape. Jianghua had entered a full slaughter mode and shouted, "Die!" Yi Shiwen now had no way out. He knew that he must not fight with Jianghua, but he could find no escape route. He rejected the invitation of one true union, and considering Jianghua's blind devotion to his master and alliance, perhaps this act was a blasphemy of his beliefs. If Yi Shiwen withdrew now, then he could be hunted to death. His only option was to continue this desperate battle, and at least try to seriously injure his opponent, then only it would be possible to escape. At this time, Jianghua seized the opportunity and shot decisively. He joined his hands and released a huge divine beam as if resembling an endless mountain, which immediately advanced towards Yi Shiwen as if to swallow him whole. The very presence of this mountain of divine beam was enough to shake the entire world. The terrifying power of Truth's seventh peak had fully manifested at this time. It was certainly beyond the imagination of an ordinary person. It could be said that it was hard to find a same-level opponent for Jiang Hua, let alone, Yi Shiwen managed to compete with him while having 2 levels less in comparison. Yi Shiwen was relying on the supreme might of Gilded Tyrant form, granting him unsurpassed attack power and defense power. The divine light held in Jiang Hua's hands transformed into a strange beast. It roared upwards and rushed towards Yi Shiwen while ejecting flames all the way from its body. Jiang Hua was going all out without any mercy, and Yi Shiwen didn't have the luxury of being lenient. Instead, he must go all out. Yi Shiwen shouted, his whole body turned bronze and began to emit unequaled gloss and luster. He looked just like an ancient overlord reborn. Boom! A terrible collision occurred and the seemingly inexhaustible divine beam was directly torn apart by Yi Shiwen. The huge mountain of light tumbled down layer by layer, taking away as many things as possible with it. The enormous power of explosion swept off and Jiang Hua was shaken by the great might displayed by Yi Shiwen just now, but Yi Shiwen himself was pushed back all the way, though it didn't cause him any injuries. Yi Shiwen didn't stop even for an instant and immediately shot his palm, releasing a golden dragon. This dragon was exuding a terrifying mysterious energy and there were traces of golden threads in its body. Yi Shiwen went all out and attacked. Jiang Hua stopped and shot his palm, causing countless air explosions. Away naked eye, one could see the endless combustion and explosions in the air, sweeping all the way and finally colliding with the golden dragon. Boom! The enormous explosion destroyed everything in the surrounding areas. The 2 experts once again battled together without rest. Jiang Hua's divine beam transformed into a large sierra of light and directly pressed down towards Yi Shiwen. It seemed as if the sky itself was caving down, like the end of the world. Yi Shiwen stood up, stimulated Gilded Tyrant form to its peak, summoned the coiling dragon and flew upwards to greet the incoming attack. Boom! Yi Shiwen and his coiling dragon routed the great sierra of divine light, but as a result of the collision he spat out blood and was sent flying down and crashed into the ground, resulting into a large crater. Jiang Hua immediately chased down and shot his palm, which turned into a mountain and pressed down upon fallen Yi Shiwen as if to crush him once and forever. Yi Shiwen was injured and the blood had begun to seep out of his whole body, and must be causing immense pain. Aya! Yi Shiwen looked up towards the sky and gave out a long and loud cry. His whole body was instantly covered with Zhen Yuan, dispersing his black hair. A domineering radiancy immediately exuded from his body. Boom! As the great mountain of divine light descended upon Yi Shiwen, he felt a surge of horror in his heart. Pang! Yi Shiwen was sent flying far away. Jiang Hua laughed and said, Yi Shiwen, you can be considered a top genius of our younger generation, but just so you know, not all geniuses manage to fully mature to show the extent of their true potential. And you have also reached a dead end, now die. Jiang Hua laughed loudly, saw an opening in Yi Shiwen's defenses and rushed towards him. Go die! Yi Shiwen suddenly opened his eyes. A golden light flashed in his eyes along with the traces of golden threads floating in his eyes. A long golden sword instantly appeared in his hand and released dreadful godly aura which swept across in all directions. The surrounding vegetation as if bowed in the prestige of the god. Any living being did not have the guts to lift their head before the absolute might of the gods. It was said that the gods were the noblest existences in all of the 10,000 worlds and no other life form could be placed on par with them. As soon as the godly aura swept off everywhere, a terrifying sword in tension was shot up into the sky. It seemed as if it minced the air and clouds and was about to cut the world itself, bringing about the birth of chaos. What is this? Jiang Hua was startled. He never expected that Yi Shiwen was actually hiding such a killer move and was enduring all this time to reveal an opening and lure him into attacking. And he actually fell into Yi Shiwen's trap. Boom! There was an earth-shattering noise and everything was annihilated in the area. Even the surrounding space was disrupted from the explosion. The sword in tension was actually composed of divinity and directly pierced into Jiang Hua's right hand when he tried to block. Ah! Jiang Hua screamed as his arm was destroyed by the golden sword in tension and literally turned into atoms. He quickly retreated almost a kilometer, but only after losing most of his arm. There was a look of terror in his eyes because this was beyond the scope of his imagination. The sword intention actually cut through the protective layer of Zhenyuan as if cutting through the plastic foam. This golden sword intention was too terrible. He did not know that more than a month's worth of collected divinity was present in that single attack. So many gods' descendants had been slaughtered by Yi Shiwen for their divinity, and he spent it all at once. Although Jiang Hua was powerful, but how could he possibly be compared with the noblest creatures between the heaven and the earth? Yi Shiwen had collected only a little bit of divinity, but this amount was enough for one effective sneak attack. Yi Shiwen spouted a mouthful of blood, but this time, there was no trace of golden divinity in the blood. It had been completely consumed in the last attack. Yi Shiwen could no longer suppress his injuries and spat blood from his mouth. Then, he clenched his teeth and instantly opened black devil wings and flew towards the depths of the demon island like a black lightning. He knew that although he caused a serious injury to Jiang Hua and compelled him to retreat, but this was not enough to make him give up. Instead, it backfired and made him even angrier. Yi Shiwen was quite satisfied to see that using golden divinity in one could make it so powerful and disastrous. Now, Yi Ziwen couldn't afford to hide his devil wings and only focused on escaping from there as a matter of first priority. Jiang Hua noticed that Yi Shiwen turned around to flee and immediately understood that this snake attack was possibly his trump card and could only be used once, otherwise, there was no need to escape. In other words, he was played, not to mention his arm was also blown up. And since he was not a devil, he couldn't possibly have the strong ability of regeneration. In other words, he lost his right arm forever, and this made his heart burn with anger and hatred. "You cannot run away from me. Today you shall die." Jiang Hua roared, and his voice like a sonic boom swept in all directions. However, his hatred for Yi Shiwen was driving him to go so far. This resentment was supporting him all the way and motivated him to pursue Yi Shiwen for so long. The two sides were now involved in a competition of willpower, and no one was willing to give up. They were already extremely tired, although Jiang Hua's level was much higher than Yi Shiwen, but Yi Shiwen possessed supreme tyrant body, not to mention, he was an extremely skilled fighter and a peerless genius. Yi Shiwen had almost used up the reserves of Zhenyuan in his body during the chase and was constantly replenishing the consumed energy by swallowing Ling Dan and converting them into Zhenyuan. Otherwise, how could he possibly keep the devil wings activated for one whole day? But Jiang Hua's situation was no better. A single attack had left him breathless, and he longer looked calm like earlier. Each time he attacked, his complexion would turn pale for a minute, and that was why he was unable to attack continuously. He was attacking only once in a while. This also allowed Yi Shiwen to catch a breath, and the interval between two attacks was the best time for resting. A distant valley appeared in front of Yi Shiwen, and countless beastly roars were originating from there in a chorus. It seemed like there was a group of demon beasts in the valley. Suddenly, Yi Shiwen felt intermittent waves of terrible coercion spreading out of there. Most probably, a legendary level demon beast was present in the valley. Yi Shiwen clenched his teeth and exclaimed in his heart, "Must risk it all." The devil wings instantly flapped at a lightning speed, and Yi Shiwen rushed into the valley like a black lightning. At this time, Yi Shiwen finally got a good view of this valley. It was a very large valley, and spread over a stretch of several hundred miles. Countless huge demon beasts were flying in flocks above the valley. Each of these demon beasts was almost 4 meters tall, had an eagle's head, lion's body, and 4 ominous claws that were exuding dark coldness. Griffin. This mythical creature was rumored to be a very fierce beast and appeared in several myths throughout the Zhenwujie. In the ancient ages, they were used as a mount to fly in the sky, but then slowly disappeared and were later labeled as extinct creatures. He never expected to actually see a large flock of griffins. Moreover, Yi Shiwen was more surprised to find out that almost every beast on this demon island possessed divinity, though some contained more and some less, but so far, he didn't see a single exception. In other words, a griffin's body was most likely to contain divinity, and this meant that griffins were also among the so-called gods' descendants. Without exception, all of the demon beast species he encountered so far on this island possessed divinity in their bodies. Yi Shiwen was sometimes terrified to think that so many species of God's descendants were living on this island, and some of them were considered extinct or only appeared in myths. In the end, what kind of secret was hidden on the demon island? Considering the presence of God's descendants on this island, it seemed like Yi Mo was right about this island being an immortal's tomb. Could it be that innumerable immortals were buried on this island? Moreover, these griffins were very frightening, each being at Truth 7th stage or Truth 8th stage. Yi Shiwen could also sense the aura of some griffins of half-step legendary realm coming from the deeper parts of the valley, as well as some legendary level griffin elders. Before Yi Shiwen could relax, Jianghua's voice sounded from behind and he arrived in the valley but was immediately speechless when he saw the flock of griffins. He knew that if griffins heard his voice then he would surely be killed. Yi Shiwen sneered since it didn't seem like this bastard would give up on chasing him, so Jianghua better not blame Yi Shiwen for what he was going to do next. Yi Shiwen stretched out his hand and curled his fingers as if to grasp something, condensed an air ball and threw it towards the flock of griffins in the sky. Yi Shiwen then immediately rushed into a gap in a nearby cliff and vanished from the scene. Jianghua saw what Yi Shiwen did and froze for a moment, then suddenly understood what Yi Shiwen was trying to do and cursed in his heart. This Yi Shiwen was such a sly guy, to think that he would actually use such a dirty trick. Before he could think of countermeasures, he saw a flock of hundreds of enraged griffins flying towards him. These griffins were enormous and looked just like dive bombers as they dived towards Jianghua. Because they only saw Jianghua on the scene, so they assumed he was the culprit and the sole intruder in their area. They were oblivious about the real instigator, Yi Shiwen, and focused their rage on Jianghua. Not to mention, Yi Shiwen had used restraining breath technique to hide his presence, including his aura and smell of blood, so the griffins couldn't sense him at all. Yi Shiwen had practiced restraining breath technique to its peak level and it once again played a big role. Yi Shiwen, you bastard! Jianghua cursed loudly and immediately turned back to escape with hundreds of griffins chasing from behind. Dealing with one griffin could be disastrous, and he was being chased by so many. He couldn't possibly dare to stay in the valley after becoming the sole target of these bloodthirsty beasts. If he was caught then he would surely be torn to pieces. Jianghua was chased all the way and eventually disappeared in the horizon. Yi Shiwen was relieved, finally got rid of that psycho. Suddenly, the sense of pain crawled all over his whole body and attacked his brain. He was gasping and his face contorted, showing immense pain and agony. Chapter 231, Power-Up Jin Yuan was continuously circulating in Yi Ziwen's body and healing the injuries. He took out a lot of healing drugs and medicinal pills from the storage space in Tianyuan Mirror and used them all to increase the healing pace. Finally, the bleeding stopped and his wounds no longer looked serious. Now, he appeared much better when compared to his earlier blood-drenched image. Yi Shiwen felt relieved but knew that this was just the beginning. Perhaps, his body sustained the worst injuries ever, and that too after practicing Gilded Tyrant form which again proved the extent of his injuries. Thinking of this, unbearable hatred welled up in Yi Ziwen's heart as he gritted his teeth. For him, this was simply an unexpected misfortune that he somehow ended up provoking a megalomaniac. However, Yi Shiwen was not a nice guy and would certainly not forget this incident. He was literally pushed to his limits and couldn't control the rage building up in his heart. He was normally a good-hearted person, but once provoked, he would neither forgive nor forget. If someone dared to fuck with him, then he would make sure to obliterate the very existence of his enemy from the face of the earth without the slightest grievance. After all, forgiveness and mercy never worked in this brutal world where strength and pride ruled all. I pledge to teach the whole One True Union a lesson. I will teach them thoroughly that they should never have fucked with me. Yi Shiwen said and clenched his teeth, and right then, the broken bones sent waves of intense pain into his brain and his face contorted. He began to breathe heavily. Rather than wasting time on such ruthless words, why not focus on recuperating first? Yemo shook his head and said, Jiang Hua's relentless attacks had done some serious damage to his body, and it was going to take a long time to reach full recovery. Yi Shiwen estimated that it would take at least 3 months to fully recuperate, but he couldn't afford to waste 3 months. After all, only a year's time was available to explore this vast island. Now, if you slowly recuperate, then it will take too long and may actually affect your vitality. You have to find a way to supplement your vitality as soon as possible. Yemo said, "These griffins are God's descendants, though certainly not as terrifying as a phoenix, but we should not overlook their sheer population. There are at least 400 to 500 griffins in this valley, which means there are enough eggs to help you in restoring your lost vitality and energy." Yi Shiwen nodded. Even he had come up with the same plan and was undoubtedly the best way to get out of this mess. Yi Shiwen had completely used up the reserves of divinity in his body in the battle. Days passed, and in a blink of an eye, a month elapsed. Yi Shiwen was crawling forward while restraining breath technique was working at its best to cover his presence completely. There was a large rock in front of him, and there was a griffin's nest right on top of it. 10 palm-sized griffin eggs were lying down in the nest, and a griffin was guarding them. After a while, it spread its wings and flew away in search of food. Yi Shiwen finally climbed up, casually picked up one egg, then quietly left that place and left towards the crevice which was acting as his hiding place in this valley. Although there were thousands of griffins' eggs in the valley, but he took only one egg from a nest. So even if a griffin noticed that one of its eggs was missing, it assumed that it must have rolled out of the nest and did not bother much. Of course, griffins were wise creatures but not comparable to humans. They would never expect someone to sneak into their nest and steal just one egg. Certainly, Yi Shiwen did not dare to sneak into the nests of formidable griffins. For example, he would not even think about going close to the nest of a half-step legendary level griffin. Yi Ziwen's skill was too low, so even after relying on restraining breath technique, it was impossible for him to hide his presence from higher-level griffins at all times. If an ordinary truth-level griffin was not vigilant, then he was sure to succeed, but half-step legendary-level griffins could easily see through his concealment. Due to the lack of level, Yi Ziwen's concealment was not perfect because a part of his breath was not concealed, and if he wanted to steal the eggs, then he must hide his presence completely, especially in front of a half-step legendary-level griffin. Not to mention, there were some legendary-level griffins in the depths of the valley, and he never thought of approaching them. Yi Shiwen didn't stand a chance against a legendary-level existence, whether it was a human, a devil, or a demon beast. The legendary realm really deserved its title because those on this realm could definitely be called legendary characters, irrespective of the species they belonged to. Just by stepping into this realm, the lifespan increased up to 1,000 years. And if the understanding of world laws was taken into consideration, then it was on a whole another level, and there were realms above it as well. Yi Shiwen still remembered how those legendary experts were killed by Golden-Winged Eagle, not to mention the entire group of formidable experts sent on an expedition to this island by Heavenly Rock faction was massacred. According to what Wu Shaochuan said, the influence of this faction in Great Yu State was apparently comparable to that of Yi Yuan School in Great Yu State. It could be said that the combined strength of all of the griffins in this valley was more tyrannical than Yi Yuan School's total strength. This place could only be compared to the sacred space located in the depths of Yi Yuan School. Yi Shiwen didn't even dare to be presumptuous and was quietly going through this area, although his speed was slow, but prevention is better than cure and safety always wins. He didn't want to disturb those terrifying half-step legendary or legendary-level demon beasts. Yi Shiwen returned to his hiding place. He had slightly rearranged the structure of this crevice during the period of 1 month he spent here, and it no longer looked like a crevice but a large dark cave. One could see broken eggshells in the corners of the cave, thought well hidden. Yi Shiwen had been absorbing the essence from all these griffin eggs for the last whole month. Yi Shiwen carefully put down the griffin egg and began to absorb its essence. The egg cracked and a very pure essence flew out of it. This essence was bound to contain large amounts of condensed energy. After all, unlike deepwater black snakes that took birth in Xiantian realm, griffins took birth in Truth realm. In other words, This essence was equivalent to the vitality of a truth-level expert. Not to forget, Yi Shiwen absorbed the essence from so many griffin eggs. Yi Ziwen's current level was not high, so these griffin eggs were quite nourishing for him. Not to mention, the divinity contained in a griffin egg was much stronger when compared to general demon beasts. This essence was gradually absorbed by Yi Shiwen. Yi Ziwen's skin instantly turned golden as he activated Tyrant Body Technique. The numerous golden threads all crawled over his body. And this time, his whole body was covered with golden threads of divinity. In other words, after resting for a month, he not only managed to completely restore his original strength but also surpassed his previous strength. Now, he wouldn't need to fight with Xiaojun for so long. At his current strength, Yi Shiwen could just slap him to death. Yi Shiwen knew for sure that Xiaojun was the reason why Wan True Union was looking for him. Since Wan True Union came looking for trouble right after Xiaojun joined it. The unreasonable, overbearing arrogance of Wan True Union became quite apparent when they came looking for trouble for no reason. After all, from Jianghua's tone, Yi Shiwen could make out that they were not giving much importance to the crushed law fragment. In fact, they used it as a topic for negotiation for roping him into their alliance. Since they did not come for the law fragment, or at least they did not come mainly for it, their sudden interest in Yi Shiwen was very strange. The only way to explain this was Xiaojun's presence in Wan True Union. He must have said something or might have provoked them against Yi Shiwen, so they came after him. However, now it did not matter anymore because Yi Shiwen already credited this account on Wan True Union's head. Now they had no choice but to suffer because he would neither forgive nor forget. Although Yi Shiwen had a recent power-up and could easily beat the experts of Truth 6th stage, he would still have a tough time dealing with the experts of Truth 7th stage. So, it seemed necessary for him to wait until stepping into the Truth 6th stage. Moreover, he was quite wary of Wan True Union's chief. He could not help but fear the tyrannical strength of this chief who actually tamed a psycho like Jianghua, a super genius of Truth 7th stage. Right now, he couldn't launch an attack on the Wan True Union, at least not until he had sufficient strength. After fully recovering and simultaneously gaining a power-up, Yi Shiwen decided to leave the Griffin Valley. Basically, it could be said that in this valley, he was constantly surrounded by danger, not to mention he had to be cautious at all times in order to not get found out by half-step legendary or legendary-level griffins. He was tired of this non-stop hide-and-seek game. After carefully exiting the Griffin Valley, Yi Shiwen felt relieved, but when he observed the surroundings, he didn't know where he was. On the day he was being chased down, he was mostly focusing on dealing with the enemy and didn't pay attention to where he was going. Now he was basically lost, but at least knew that he was probably already out of the outermost regions of the Demon Island because the demon beasts here were significantly stronger than those in the outermost regions, for example, the griffins. But anyway, Yi Shiwen had been planning to explore the depths of the island, and as long as he would continue to march towards the huge mountain of dead Qi, located at the center of the Demon Island, he would eventually reach his destination. Night gradually deepened and endless stars appeared in the sky. It seemed like a gigantic Shen formation in the sky, projected directly onto the Demon Island. As he continued advancing towards the depth of the Demon Island, he discovered something strange. In the night, the starlight projected onto the Demon Island was being absorbed by all types of demon beasts, making their bodies glow with faint silver light. Yes, they were absorbing the energy of the stars. They are absorbing the quintessence of the stars. An idea suddenly cropped up in his mind as he remembered reading about this in the ancient legends. The ancient myths mentioned about the so-called evil spirits, could be plants, beasts, or human beings, who were capable of absorbing the quintessence from the heavenly bodies, including the sun and moon. So in this case, it was the quintessence of the stars? Yi Shiwen tried before but could not absorb the so-called quintessence of the sun and the moon. Later, he found out that it was nothing but a crappy concept since that little touch of energy was only enough to survive and nothing more, a concept filled with utter nonsense. But now he discovered that this legend was not nonsense, but a mistake on his part since he used ordinary irradiation laws for absorbing the quintessence of the heavenly bodies. So, there was actually a need of special methods, or perhaps a special type of gene in the body, in order to absorb and harness the quintessence of heavenly bodies. Without these necessary things, one could not harness the energy of heavenly bodies. Otherwise, it would basically turn into an alternate source of energy, enough to sustain life at the most. It really is a vast method. Just look at the power of these stars, infinite. Emo pointed towards the sky and said, "This mysterious huge Shinarei is restraining the rich energy of a total of 1,800 most luminous stars, and then this massive energy is being projected on the island. No wonder this island's demon beasts are so tyrannical. After showering in the illumination of these stars for so long, even the most ignorant and weakest demon beasts will eventually power up to become extraordinary. Moreover, look at the ominous dead chi erupting from that huge mountain and forming a dense cloud in the sky. The dense cloud spreads throughout the island and envelopes the entire island in the night, thereby blocking all the stars, and not just that, these clouds also block the outward diffusion of energy by forming a large diaphragm of dead chi. Although the clouds of dead chi are not as thick on the rest of the island as above that huge mountain, there is no doubt these clouds block most of the starlight. And this is a good thing because considering the massive energy present in the starlight originating from so many stars, if it fully illuminated the entire island, then the demon beasts on this island will be on a whole other level. And then you and those other experts won't be able to survive on this island." Emo said, "Plus we saw the ruins of an ancient civilization. On top of that, all of the demon beasts on this island are God's descendants. Now I can affirm that this island is an encampment of a terrifying influence, possibly at the level of 10,000 worlds community. Moreover, it's most probably a demon race encampment, and all the demon beasts here are the descendants of that demon race. Obviously, several members of that demon race must have been immortals, perhaps belonging to a big organization." Emo speculated, and his whole body actually shivered. A legendary immortal organization was only heard of in fables. One must know that immortals were frightening existences and worked like a deterrent community. If so, then everything could be explained. This large Shinarei with its mysterious power of trapping starlight was actually planted by a mighty demon race. It also explained the origins of the ominous dead chi on the mountain. So this was the reason why the demon beasts of this island were more powerful. This was indeed a reasonable explanation. However, Yi Shiwen had a cold feeling about this organization. After all, such an organization was far more formidable than the combined influence of the 10 countries of the southeast region. In fact, even the might of the whole Zhen Wujie was nothing in comparison. However, such a formidable influence actually became dilapidated like this and finally became a practice field for the young geniuses of the southeast region. What was going on? Yes, Yi Shiwen always found this island very strange and shrouded in mysteries, but now he felt somewhat dismal about it. Perhaps, millions of years had passed since its original glory, which gradually submerged in the sandstorm of time and would continue to do so, retelling the tales of its lost civilization which couldn't escape destruction despite being so formidable. Yi Shiwen lightly asked, "Emo, you tell me what in the world is this so-called immortality is? Even great masters like me or magnificent forces such as this immortal demon race ultimately find it difficult to escape death." Emo said in a low voice, "Maybe the so-called immortality exists, but peerless geniuses still ascend the road to heaven singing and dancing along the way. Well, anyway, these things are still far away from me." Yi Shiwen shook his head and decided to throw away these distractions. In fact, he could hear about these things just because Emo was at his side. Otherwise, he wouldn't even bother knowing about them. The more he knew about these things, the more he became aware of his tiny existence. Then, abruptly, Yi Shiwen discovered something underfoot. He immediately looked down and saw a yellow-green river which was exuding yellowish light, and it was actually corroding the Zhenyuan around his feet. Yi Shiwen was immediately startled and quickly retreated all the way back and went out of the scope of this yellow river and asked in a surprised voice, "What is this yellow water?" "This yellow water is actually dead people flowing down the so-called River of Dead," Emo explained. River of the Dead? How many people must have died to give rise to this river of dead? Yi Shiwen looked at the yellow river flowing all the way into the distance. Yi Shiwen observed that the source of this yellow river was none other than that ominous mountain. And in the night, it looked even more strange and ominous. It is really a big fortune that we get to see it. Countless people must have suffered unjust deaths, giving rise to such rich dead qi. Yemo said, and their souls and resentment have coagulated into this yellow river. The fables about hell talk about a river that has been flowing from the beginning of time and will flow till the end of time. It flows across time and space and is well known among mortals as River Styx. Yemo said, it is also called River of the Dead or the Yellow River. Although the titles are different, the river contains the essence of the dead and they must spend a long time flowing in River Styx before entering the hell. But we are actually able to see a part of the river here. Such good luck. Roar! 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 Terrible cries of terror were sounding from the river and echoing everywhere. In his past life, Yi Shiwen had also heard of this legend but never took it seriously until now when he finally saw the river Styx with his own eyes. Please go to install our app to read the latest chapters for free. Chapter 233, The Sixth Samsara. However, Yi Shiwen soon discovered the real horror behind that scene and heard intermittent battle cries arising straight from the Yellow River. An unknown form of energy coagulated and took form of countless soldiers in a large battle arrangement as they were shouting kill again and their expedition was marching towards the hell. These were the resentments of the dead that had condensed at this time. But they were the dead members of which force? It looked like an expedition marching on the ninth heaven. Boundless killing intention was rolling down the Yellow River and dense dead qi was proliferating in the air and appeared like ominous clouds, concealing the presence awe-inspiring evil spirits. Ha! Suddenly, there came a loud battle cry and Yi Shiwen saw an array of soldiers, who had congealed from dead qi and resentment and flowing down the Yellow River stream, being directly slaughtered. But he didn't care about those soldiers because his attention was caught by a khaki-colored figure who was shuttling back and forth in the river and his long sword was sweeping endless sword light in all directions, killing several soldiers with each strike. He appeared like a 20-year-old young guy clad in a khaki-colored robe, with a slightly pale face but carrying an extremely cold expression, and the sword in his hand was actually releasing terrifying sword light, capable of slaughtering those soldiers. In fact, the soldiers were unable to encircle him no matter how much they tried. Yi Shiwen clearly saw that after dying, the soldiers transformed back into their original dead qi form, and afterwards, this dead qi was actually absorbed by the tip of his sword, making the sword light seem even brighter and formidable than before. Yi Shiwen was shocked by this. This guy was actually absorbing the dead qi as a means of cultivation, and although those soldiers were not conscious but still held killing instinct, almost every one of them was no less than an expert of truth 5th stage, and some were at 6th or even 7th stage. In their lifetime, they must have been much more tyrannical, but at present, they were merely shadows of their real selves, just a collection of resentments arising from the Yellow River of the dead. Perhaps, they used to be on legendary realm when they were alive? Maybe even above that. Thinking of this, Yi Shiwen had a kind of scalp-tingling sensation. This world really had so many fearful forces with countless peerless experts. The real strength of even one of these dead experts was simply hard to imagine. And this man was shuttling back and forth in the battalions of these soldiers and killing endlessly. In a blink of an eye, he killed several soldiers of Truth 5th stage and their dead qi was absorbed by him, thereby increasing the intensity of his sword light once again. Chapter 234, Truth 6th Stage. Initially, I thought that since we both are on the same level then I will have enough strength to defeat you, but it looks like my practice is not enough. The man said in a somewhat self-ridiculing manner, but there wasn't a shred of discouragement in his tone. The gods' favored ones like him must have experienced many tribulations and sufferings. How could one or two failures discourage such a person? Unless he was some pampered prince, but judging from his appearance, he didn't seem like one. He didn't seem like the arrogant type, rather he seemed like someone who would never betray a friend. I must say, you are truly super strong for someone on Truth's 6th stage. Yi Shiwen smiled and praised him. This was not nonsense. After all, Yi Shiwen had always been super strong when compared to other experts on the same level, so it was really hard to find a rival on the same level. It could be said that the future prospects of such a person was basically immeasurable. Why didn't you kill me? I was the one who started this. The man asked. Because you do not have the intention to kill, and I am not the type of guy who involves himself in needless indiscriminate slaughter. Yi Shiwen said. He always respected other fighters and didn't believe in killing for fun. Of course, if someone intended to kill him, then he wouldn't hesitate to kill either. Well, that's good. The man smiled. I am Mu Ling, Yellow River Sect's disciple. Yi Shiwen gawked for a moment because he had never heard of this sect, although there was nothing strange about it. After all, there were innumerable sects in this world and he was not an encyclopedia. Yi Shiwen, a disciple from Yiyuan School. Yi Shiwen said and realized that Mu Ling must have been practicing in the depths of the Demon Island for a long time, otherwise he should have definitely heard recent rumors about him. Yi Shiwen and Mu Ling chatted for a while and got to know each other. Yi Shiwen discovered that he had practiced a special martial technique and was able to use the yellow water for cultivation. Particularly, a yellow spring was simply a godsend gift for such practitioners. Since the seniors from his sect had also been summoned before, so he knew that Yellow River appeared every night in the depths of this island. Mu Ling had been practicing here for some time and didn't want Yi Shiwen to discover his secret, so he used the scare-away tactic on Yi Shiwen. When Mu Ling heard that Yi Shiwen planned to go further deep into the forest, he frowned and said, I urge you to not go too close to that ominous mountain. The people of Yellow River Sect are most sensitive to dead qi, and that mountain is probably hiding a terrible secret, something that you shouldn't involve yourself with. I thank you for the heads up. I will stay cautious. Yi Shiwen said. At this time, the currents in Yellow River got stronger all of a sudden, and even the new influx of soldiers, appearing in the river, were getting stronger than before with extremely high-level soldiers. Some demon beasts and human soldiers appeared to be of half-step legendary realm, arranged in neat ranks and marching towards an unknown destination. According to what Mu Ling said, the souls and resentments in River Styx from 6 p.m. onward till midnight weren't usually too strong, but for the rest of the night, incomparably fearful monsters would appear in large numbers. 2 giant teams of soldiers were fighting in the Yellow River, and their strength was also getting more and more intrepid. All night, Yi Shiwen continued to look at this mighty expedition of the dead. This scene was simply like the legendary fable of demon soldiers. Horrifying monsters continued to appear for the rest of the night. Just from one look, one would feel their soul being sucked into an infinite ice pit, feeling a kind of an inexplicable chill throughout the body, as if simply crawling out from the hell. Yi Shiwen watched until sunrise when the Yellow River gradually disappeared without a trace. Fortunately, however, as Mu Ling said, these armies of dead soldiers would not attack unless attacked by the living. They were as if immersed in their own lives, in a mighty campaign which seemed like an undecided battle from when they were alive, and did not care about Yi Shiwen, who watched their battle whole night from the sidelines. Yi Shiwen did not stay there for long. This type of practice style was suitable for Mu Ling, not for him. Yi Shiwen decided to indulge in absorbing divinities and strengthen gilded tyrant form. He was waiting for his golden body to reach the peak level, because then even at his current level he would be able to kill that psycho Jianghua in one hit. It would immediately pick him from the weak spot and place on the strong spot, making him strong enough for the job. As this island had been divided up by the major forces among themselves, and gradually all of the treasures were seized, after a tangled warfare, the leaders of various forces also determined that it was time to explore the depths of the Demon Island. They did not come here to fight but to explore this island for its treasures. In less than a month, various strong alliances had already explored up to the spot where Yi Shiwen and Mu Ling met. And at this time, a big rumor broke out which made everyone boil up with excitement. A complete immortal palace was found in A Sierra. finding a fully intact immortal palace was really a huge achievement. This immediately stirred all of the experts. In fact, just like Yi Shiwen, others also speculated that this island was possibly the residence of a tyrannical influence. In fact, Yi Shiwen had discovered the ruins of a large palace earlier and guessed correctly. This also indicated the remains of a big adventure, immortal soldiers, ancient martial arts, a variety of immortality pills, all kinds of adventures, all kinds of treasures were likely to occur among these ruins. Moreover, according to their observations, the ancient civilization that resided here was very powerful and terrifying and left behind a magnanimous palace. Not to mention, it was an unguarded immortal palace and several sects must have attacked it in order to obtain the treasures hidden inside but couldn't succeed. For so many years, so many sects and so many experts tried to capture this immortal palace for its treasures, but no one was successful in achieving that. In the end, several factions and sects faced destruction, such as Heavenly Rock faction. There were countless formidable forces scattered in this vast sea, but this demon island was probably far beyond their imagination. One simply couldn't comprehend the scope of the treasures left behind by an ancient immortal civilization, and neither was it easy to make a guess about the vastness of the treasure trove hidden in this immortal palace. After obtaining the news, suddenly, numerous experts flew towards the immortal palace. Inside a cave, Yi Shiwen had planted breath isolation matrix method and was indulged in closed-door training. He had been like this for full 5 days. Yi Ziwen's golden body was glowing and the dark golden light was illuminating the entire cave. More and more golden threads were crawling on his bronze flesh, indicating that he accumulated a large amount of divinity. During this whole month, he killed countless demon beasts, and finally, the upper of his body was completely covered with divinity. Gilded tyrant form was half complete and his cultivation had also reached the point of breakthrough. His body reached the limit of withstanding the accumulated Zhen Yuan and he needed to step into next stage as soon as possible. It was always tough for him to have a breakthrough, but at the same time, after the breakthrough, his inner state would be much stronger than other experts of the same level. Mysterious space was crazily devouring Ling Dan and absorbing Lingqi from them, and under his control, information regarding various martial arts and world laws was being projected in his mind, making all the necessary preparations for stepping into the 7th stage. It was just like the last-minute cramming up for an exam. He was quickly grasping the knowledge and information required for stepping into the next level, and was able to do so thanks to the presence of mysterious space in his mind. Zhen Yuan was crazily surging in his body and there was a fast increase in aura. It was always very difficult to control the sudden eruption of aura during a breakthrough. Therefore, experts generally chose a calm and steady place for having a breakthrough because of the turbulence it created in the surroundings and attracted the attention of people. No one would want to face an enemy during the breakthrough. However, Yi Shiwen had no other choice since he was on this demon island and couldn't possibly expect to find a completely safe place. So, he planted a breath isolation matrix method outside the cave with a protective curtain released by Tianyuan mirror on the inside. The motive was to not attract the attention of tyrannical demon beasts. Yi Ziwen's breath continued to rise bit by bit and quickly reached the peak of truth 5th stage, followed by reaching the stage barrier. Yi Shiwen let go of his control on Zhen Yuan and fully mobilized it within his body. Boom! Yi Ziwen's breath suddenly rose and directly reached Truth's 6th stage in one fell swoop. There was no ordinary gap between 5th and 6th stage, and he finally crossed this gap. Before this breakthrough, he was able to beat a peak-level expert of the 6th stage. So, now his battle strength would certainly have an enormous growth. Yi Shiwen opened his eyes and a smile appeared on his face. Now, he could easily beat the experts of Truth 7th stage, which placed him among the few top experts on this island. Yi Shiwen stood up, withdrew the matrix method and Tianyuan mirror, instantly turned into a streamer of light and vanished into the horizon. Yes, he was going towards the rumored immortal palace. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.